and something that they're finding value in every single day.
We did disrupt the industry and we disrupted an experience. And I think we're still innovating in those areas, especially in results, to the pandemic of how we're reaching consumers and how they're shopping and virtual appointments and how we're connecting with them.
Most consumers today want to invest in brands that are doing good in the world.
As we think about DEI, it's not just people of color, it's people in the, LGBTQ plus community, people with different abilities. As we think about our Asian brothers and sisters and what they're going through at a time like this, companies really have to pause and really embrace their internal employees. And so a lot of the work that needs to start has to and must start internally.
Diversity is a fact. It's just representation. It's who we are. It's identity. Everyone is diverse. Inclusion is a choice. It's a choice that is often made by the person including versus the person needing to be included. So there's already privilege in that equation. All of us can remember a time where we haven't belonged and what that feels like, and also know what belonging needs to feel like and should feel like and connect to it. And so it is a universal concept. It transcends all people. It is directly connected to humanity.
In the face of such hate and in the face of such violence, if what the Me Too movement, if what Black Lives Matter taught us was that this is a worthy fight, worthy of our time, worthy of our attention. And this is not just our fight. This is a cultural awakening that's been happening for a few years now. We have to continue to fight for a better future so then the people that come after us don't have to have the same conversations. They can have a different conversation.
It really takes that breaking through to the other side of bringing together a coalition of allies across all communities for us to kind of break out of the echo chamber and really turn this into a national movement. And I'm so grateful for this space where we can have that community as members and allies.
This is a really important time for brands to step forward. This is not a time to call it play it safe and be unheard, unseen. You've got to be seen, you've got to be visible.
With the cultural demographic shift that's happening in this country, more and more people are asking those questions. What is it the brand is doing and what are they standing for and how are you showing up? So engaging with the consumer and leading by example is incredibly important.
Well, that was a great recap of a fantastic tentpole event that we put on, and so great to see all of those speakers again. But we're really looking forward to today's Future of TV Summit. So without further ado, I am thrilled to welcome our first speakers of the day. Please welcome to the stage Colleen Conkling, the Senior Director of Integrated Marketing at Third Love. And moderating the session will be Mike Perlman, the Chief Revenue Officer at TVision Insights. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Emily.
Yeah, thanks for kicking us off today. I'll hand it over to you guys and pop back in at the end.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you. Thanks to everybody for joining, and thank you, Colleen, for participating in today's fireside chat.
No problem. I'm just trying to figure out this virtual background thing. I think it's starting right now, but I'm in it.
Yeah, I was having some trouble with the Brand Innovator background, so I've got my TVision background.
Okay, I think I got it.
All right.
Cool.
There you go. Right on. So why don't we start off by kind of introducing ourselves to the people out there. So I guess, Colleen, tell me a little bit about your background and about what you're doing now over at Third Love.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you, Mike, and talk about this really important and interesting topic. So I've been in marketing pretty much my whole career in some way, shape, or form for about 15 years. I started in corporate communications and PR. So all the storytelling, I like to say I'm a storyteller in the B2B space. And then a little bit after that, about 7 years into my career, I actually switched into brand marketing and brand management. So I spent about a little over 6 years at the Coca-Cola company, working on big brands like Vitamin Water and Powerade and big campaigns like Olympic campaigns, to starting a smaller brand called Fruit Water that was kind of like bootstrappy even by Coke standards. And then I pivoted into the retail world and I went to Bonobo. So whole new universe of end-to-end consumer engagement, driving sales through e-commerce, retail, fast pace, and really kind of balancing both the product commitment on products that fit you in an exceptional way, but also laddering into an emotional way of how you fit in the world. And then in my most recent incarnation, I am at Third Love, which is the women's intimates and essentials company, founded on bras that have the perfect fit, but now we're actually expanding into other categories with our recent launch of loungewear. And here I have a really cool role. I actually oversee what's called integrated marketing, and that includes both the brand team and the brand marketing and strategy side of the business, go to marketing strategy, et cetera, but also the growth team, which includes your more traditional performance marketing, as well as our brand media buys. And what's really cool about my role is that it's usually not done this way at other companies. You usually have growth team and the brand team, and sometimes they're siloed. And this is really trying to bring that together to think about how can you think holistically about filling your funnel, whether that be from brand awareness and familiarity and consideration, all the way through to new customer acquisition, and ensuring that there is a coherent strategy and expression of your brand across both of these. And what's interesting is because my background, I have touched on brand. I actually led the creative team for a little bit at Bonobos as well. Like bringing that all together at Third Love has been really exciting for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It sounds like a super cool role, being able to combine both those sides of marketing. And your background, you have a really interesting background from really classic CPG to kind of emerging direct-to-consumer brands now. And today's conversation is all about the future of TV. Be interesting to hear kind of, I guess, how you see TV playing a role at the traditional CPG companies compared to the DTC companies, where you're at now. How does that differ? How does TV play a role as far as a channel at those two different types of companies?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you asked that. And, it's funny because I haven't been at one of those big CPG companies, I guess, since 2017 is when I left. And I'm sure that it's changing and evolving as consumers have different touch points. But like the primary difference is kind of how these businesses touch consumers, right? Like I always like to say that when I worked at Coke, our conversion metrics were like converting a customer was getting someone to walk into a 7-Eleven and buy a Powerade. And we're going to measure that through Nielsen, et cetera. And maybe you have that interaction at that point of sale with that customer, but from a media buy perspective, out of home, that kind of things become more important. But when you're thinking about TV and touching customers from like those larger CPGs where there's a number of steps before the consumer buys, it's all about how are you keeping your brand top of mind so that you are there and have that share of mind when that person has that occasion to purchase your product. Right. Now, so you're thinking that KPIs are more like bigger brand awareness. So brand awareness, aided and unaided, favorability, purchase intent, values. Are you lining up with the key brand identifiers or values that you want the consumer to see? And you're kind of seeing that effect over the long term, only measuring every quarterly, for example, maybe every half year or even every year. And you're looking at media mix modeling maybe once a year to optimize your TV spend across what you're doing. When you move into kind of these DTC companies and e-commerce in particular, obviously conversion is getting someone to come to your site and buy your product. And there's a much shorter life cycle. And so the role of TV ends up having a dual purpose, which is all of those things I talked about with CPG. You want to build your brand, you want to drive favorability, you want to be measuring brand health over time and ensuring that you will stay top of mind. But there's also an immediacy to it because TV itself it's not a one-screen experience anymore, right? So you're looking not only at those longer term metrics, but like, are you driving traffic? There's a lot of measurement platforms there. You can see like that direct, like when your ad is on television or on some OTT, is someone interacting and going to your site? We're looking at direct traffic. We're looking at organic search to see if like we're actually getting a kind of real-time view on the impact of something that would be more traditionally long-term. And then there is this blend of it driving direct response. For us at Third Love, we have a campaign in the marketplace right now that's really great called Your Boobs Deserve Third Love. It's really funny. and is very different for the marketplace. And what we saw after we launched that campaign, which was we did not set out to drive sales with it. That's always kind of the nice icing on the cake. But we saw a really strong halo effect of efficiency on our performance marketing spend. So all of a sudden, all of the performance dollars that we're putting out there are working that much harder for us, and we're driving sales that way.
Interesting.
And so, I think that's I guess a kind of long answer to say that like the arc and the purpose and the different ways that you can use TV in particular when it comes to an e-commerce brand, I think is much richer and much more complicated in some ways, because there's like ways that you can track and measure immediately and potentially like pivot your tactics or tools in a much quicker way than I ever would have done, say, at a Coca-Cola when I'm planning into, our partnership spend with the Olympics on Powerade.
Got it. And when you're at Third Love, when you're planning TV campaigns, you mentioned that it kind of plays a role within the overall marketing spend. Are you planning that completely independent of the performance-based campaigns, or is it all integrated as far as one overarching strategy where TV is going to play this particular role within the funnel, so to speak, and then we're going to amplify it through other channels that might be more of a direct response type of role?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. It's the latter, but that's more recent. Third Love is it's a startup still, and it's one of it was the pioneer in the industry, right? It kind of broke the mold on what bras could be, and went up against the behemoth of Victoria's Secret. And I'd say in the television that Third Love had done in the past, it had been viewed a little bit more as a tactic. Like, how can we leverage this channel to drive brand awareness, to drive some returns, and also using TV as a direct response tool. However, now, and particularly with this Your Boobs Deserve Third Love campaign, it is a part of holistic planning in which we had a series of KPIs and a series of what we were trying to achieve, where TV played that large scale, broad reach role, but we supplemented it with content, creative messaging that all laddered back into this like holistic 360 campaign, but in channels and with vehicles and assets that were much more direct response, that referenced our 20% off new customer discount, or our 30% bundling discount that you get, where there was that call to action, or whether the creative actually was much more performance driven. And I think that that's what led to the strong gains that we saw when we were on, like March was when we were on TV the most, with our highest GRPs. And that the sync up of that was that, as I mentioned before, that kind of coherent customer journey to make the campaign more effective. And I think that that's a learning that I will be taking forward into however we use however we have a larger brand campaign. But I do think, to your point, there are ways that TV can stand alone outside of a campaign to act in some kind of an always on capacity too. So it's like, we like to think about an ignite, build, sustain model at Third Love, and that sustain time period. Maybe you're not running a major campaign and your TV doesn't tie back holistically to every single piece of content and creative you have in the marketplace, but it allows enough of that that always on message around what your brand is to maintain interest at a level that allows you to get to kind of like the next big fully integrated touch point.
Got it. That makes sense. And so you mentioned a few times TV driving direct response, which I think a lot of people would maybe be surprised at, thinking, well, how does that work? So I'm curious, just tactically, when you guys are planning TV and thinking, okay, we are going to kind of leverage this to some extent as a direct response vehicle, how do you go about executing that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think that, this is what you see as the rise of DTCs playing in TV, right? And it goes back to that point that I made, that TV viewing right now is not a one-screen experience. And it's like almost like, if we wanted to have an existential conversation, what is TV? Like, what is TV? Today, even like TV, I watch YouTube TV on my TV. That's my cable, but that's a streaming platform. but you know, and so with all of these lines blurring, there is a much more, there is a stronger and clear ability for DTC brands to use strong CTAs to drive traffic and interest in redeeming that. So whether that be an offer and ensuring that you have a strong offer at your end card or integrated into the ad itself. So one of the things we did with Your Boobs Deserve Third Love is that we created it off of a long form piece of content that we were able to launch online that included the CTAs in the creative itself to make it engaging and interesting, and that consumers would want to respond to it in that way. And then you can use platforms to obviously tie back to the time that those specific ads aired and understand where those codes redeemed. What are we seeing in sales during those particular ads so that you can measure the effectiveness in it. So, you know, I think that that's what we think about it in that way. It's what is the mix of the platforms between traditional linear TV and OTT streaming TV, understand that people are going to be to screening, and what are the creative nods or tools that we can use beyond just your traditional end card to incentivize them to come and check you out and try sales.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. You kind of touched on the fact that, you know, what is TV? Essentially, people are getting long form content over a variety of screens and, you know, through linear, through connected TV devices. So when you guys are thinking about deploying media and leveraging, let's call it the large screen as TV, but through both linear and connected, how are you making decisions as far as where to place media, how big to go into linear, how big to go into connected TV, you know, as just the world of, you know, consumer behavior is just changing so quickly in terms of how they're actually getting their content?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I think I saw a recent stat that linear TV has decreased in terms of time spent year over year for the last 3 years, or in terms of viewership as well. And what I think is really telling about that is that it either decreased or plateaued on those platforms, even during COVID, when everyone's at home with their TVs. And I think that that's like, that was a real big wake up stat to me, because I'm like, wow, okay, you know, people are inside their homes and they're choosing other platforms, or they're using, like what you said, their big screen TV that's in their living room to stream something. The way that we view it, like at least for Third Love, we have a pretty broad target. So effectively, it could be any woman that wears a bra. But, you know, when we think about our target, we do think about that she's like likely 24 to 54, maybe a little bit higher household income. And at that point at which she's ready to graduate into something that's more quality, we know that linear TV still has the reach.
Yeah.
It still has reach that you can't get at levels that you can get through other streaming platforms. And the thing is that with streaming platforms, we're still kind of evolving and learning there. And there are platforms that are not ad supported. And those might be some with the greatest reach. And because you start to get a little bit more niche in terms of who's watching what, you're not necessarily getting that broad reach that you can get on TV, which a brand like Third Love benefits from, right? So we benefit from female-driven programming because we have a broader audience. Now, as you get to a smaller audience then, or a more niche product or target consumer, that's where broad reach TV doesn't work as well. So for us, that's like, we know that Third Love still has a ways to go with awareness, and linear TV is really about driving that top of mind awareness. Now, when it comes to streaming platforms and what we're considering there, there's a lot more about the contextual relevance we can do. And what I think is interesting, and what Third Love has gotten success in the past of doing, and we will continue to do going forward, is finding those opportunities that are not just run of show, or run of network, or not really run of network, but run of show with your with OTT, but integration opportunities that allow us to have a positive brand halo effect in terms of our brand equity, or knowing a little bit more about the mindset of the consumer that's going to reach it. So for example, we have now partnered 2 years in a row with Hulu to sponsor their Women's History Month, or Made by Her content during Women's History Month. That has been incredibly successful for us because it's aligned from a values perspective, as us as a women-driven company, a female-founded company, to amplify that. But we also know that there's an interest from a female audience as well. And this year it actually proved incredibly successful for us because basically the day before Women's History Month and this Hulu platform launched was when Nomadland won the Golden Globe. So the next day, Third Love's brand name was next to Nomadland, and that was not just pretty cool, but it also served the platform.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That it sounds like you're viewing CTV and linear, CTV not just as kind of the new linear, right? But it's actually a different channel, and you're kind of different goals that you have through CTV maybe than linear. So are you then measuring the efficacy of each channel, you know, CTV being a channel and linear being a channel differently, or do you kind of measure the success of your media the same way?
Yeah, so we do measure. I'd say that we're on a journey. I like to say, you know, wherever we're at, we're on a journey. I think we're on a journey to measure it slightly differently. From a TV perspective, I mean, we're looking at NTA modeling and that kind of stuff, you know, we're in the process of that. But like from a TV perspective, going back to that reach thing, it is those like, are we really breaking through with those true top of funnel brand health metrics? Like, let's not look at them more than 4 times a year. Like, it takes a lot to move the needle there. Like, are we really gaining an unaided awareness, which quite frankly, that's where we need to go. When you're thinking about streaming, OTT, CTV, et cetera, there is an opportunity to look at engagement more. There is an opportunity to look at, like, are we driving traffic more, understanding that viewing might be happening on different platforms. You know, someone might be on their phone, on their iPad, et cetera, on their laptop, and there is a little bit more of a direct response component there. I can say that even from, and where kind of the future is going, which I'm excited about, is that you know, when I was at Bonobos, we had run through Hulu and leveraged their Brightline platform where there's actually lead gen involved in it. And, you know, I don't think we've cracked the nut yet there. But I think that is the future and the opportunity for streaming, because we don't know what's going to come up. Like, if you 10 years ago, if you asked us, is this where we would be? No one would have known. So we don't know where we're going to be in 10 years or so, but at least from trends, it is going to trend more and more to these personal devices, these personalized experiences that you can have. And I think that that's something that you can truly unlock through the streaming platforms that you can't do with linear TV.
Right.
It's just it's always going to be some kind of broad reach vehicle.
Right. And then in terms of the streaming platforms, I guess, how are you guys thinking about integrating campaigns on the streaming side with, call it, classic digital, right? So other types of digital marketing, where you might have the same type of ability to target particular audiences that you do on the CTV side. I'm curious if that's completely integrated, or if you're viewing CTV marketing kind of bucketed a little bit more with linear and not as integrated with other digital type marketing.
Yeah, so I would say that for us right now, at this moment, we'll talk about now and then we'll talk about the future. Right now, because that's what we're talking about, right? So right now, we are thinking about it bucketed a little bit more with the traditional TV and how do the two complement each other. But that's also because I would say that Third Love is still on a journey with expanding into other digital platforms like display, the programmatic, et cetera, where I think the unlock is, and I know we touched on this when we chatted in our prep a little bit, is that there are so many platforms now which have linear components like NBC Universal and then Hulu. And then you've got the Paramount Plus going on. And that's going to just continue. And I think that those are publishers and places that do not just exist with a linear component and a streaming component, but they also have strong digital. And what we are in talks to do, and I don't think that at least from my experience yet, that the networks and companies have truly unlocked the potential for integrating all of those pieces together. Yeah. Because going back to what we were saying about engagement is that I truly think that, like, offering insurgent or interesting ways that you're integrating into like a TV, like, that the future is that I don't want to just buy like a 15, 30-second ad. I want to understand how it can weave throughout all of these components so that consumer that is interacting with those platforms and all their different devices has different touch points and an interesting and memorable experience with our brand throughout each of them. And like I said, we haven't gotten there yet because we've had a couple of talks with some of those platforms, and that's what we want to do. But I truly think that that's going to be the unlock in the future, especially as you're seeing more and more places, more and more linear, traditionally linear companies and platforms entering into the streaming space.
Yeah. Are there any brands or companies out there right now that you guys are looking at where you think that they're doing it particularly well as far as integrating CTV, linear with digital, kind of in a holistic?
Oh gosh. Yeah, you're putting me on the spot there. I actually don't. Nothing comes to mind. Now you're going to make me want to go and like look up a bunch of stuff after this. Nothing really comes to mind because I don't think that the nut has been cracked yet. And maybe it has. And I'm going to put that out to anyone that's listening. If there's something that comes to mind where you think that they're doing it really well, let me know, because we'd love to learn from it.
Got it. Yeah. Oh, great. Well, I know we're coming up on time here a little bit, I think. How about the future? I guess, at this point, obviously, people's consumption of media is changing so rapidly as far as the type of device and the ability to time shift content, and makes it just incredibly complex from a marketer's perspective. What are your thoughts in terms of where you see this going in the future? Any broad trends you think will continue, or trends right now that you think might somehow go in a different direction?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, I don't think the trend of linear TV tapering off is going to change anytime soon. I think that in the near term, it's probably going to accelerate as vaccinations increase and people are getting excited about, I don't know about you, but I have tons of summer plans for the first time in a year. And as people get out of the door, I don't think that media consumption is going to take a massive hit. I think that people are used to consuming now at a pace. I saw like some stat that said that with two screen consumption, it's actually a 31-hour day now in terms of like, it's crazy. But and we all need to step away from our screens. But so anyways, I do think that like the trend for traditional linear TV is going to continue to decelerate. I would say there's a couple of things. So I think that, one of them is, and we chatted about this before, this idea of shifting to engagement versus just impressions. Like, what is an impression? You can't really guarantee that those eyeballs are looking at your ad. And I get like, millions of impressions, billions of impressions. I'm like, what does that really mean? I mean, if no one actually looks at it, or if someone's reading their phone while your ad is playing. So how are you measuring engagement? And how are you creating content that's engaging, that feels like additive to someone's day and experience versus detracting or an interruption? So I think that that's going to be really important, and brands will shift the way that they measure as well as the way that they create content to meet that. And I think that goes back to a little bit of like cracking the nut on the integration piece and feeling like bigger than it is as opposed to just a traditional media buy. I think that personalization will continue to become important, and it will be interesting. This is maybe future casting a lot. It will be interesting to see if linear TV and networks can figure out the personalization piece more. Because I do think that, like, I was actually thinking of iOS 14 in prepping for this, and how that's, privacy, and that's making some things more difficult. And maybe this is just because I'm a marketer, but I'm like, I actually like the ads that I get served, because especially in some digital platforms, they're getting much more relevant to me. Yeah. And so I do think personalization is going to become a little bit more important. But to that point, with the privacy piece and some digital platforms that have been traditionally so reliable potentially becoming unstable or less reliable, there might be more of a push for like cracking some of that nut, particularly in the streaming space. And then the final piece I'll say, and this is again, like, maybe it's not in the too distant future, but I don't own an Oculus, but I experienced one for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and it was obviously like pretty incredible. And that technology is now much too expensive, I'd say, for the mass market. However, that was also what TV was a long time ago. And it's not, that expensive when you compare it to a very nice television. And so I, in hearing some of my friends thinking about different use cases for that kind of technology, like working out, et cetera, I could see that like that becomes new technology and entertainment for the future. And if advertisers can figure out how to get in there early, it could unlock the personalization, it could unlock the engagement and and just a whole new way of doing this. So those are my predictions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it could be a completely new medium for telling stories, right? I guess from a marketer's perspective, it's all about telling a brand story out to the market and, through different ways. And mentioning engagement, so that's certainly something we're thinking a lot about here at T-Vision, right? It's kind of the thesis for our company around, an impression's not valuable if nobody's in the room and if they're not paying attention to the actual screen itself. So that's something that we work with marketers a lot in terms of diving in and truly measuring engagement with content. In terms of, I guess you mentioned a little bit around targeting. So we actually have a few more minutes than I originally thought, so we can dive in a couple more questions. So you mentioned kind of getting to particular consumer segments. So how do you balance that both on the goal of kind of general brand awareness for your brand with kind of micro targeting down to particular segments that are of most, that are most applicable to you guys? Because how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, I think from as it relates to TV and OTT, as I mentioned before, at least for Third Love, and even for when I was at Bonobos before, we were thinking about, not necessarily a pretty broad target, right? And so when we're drilling down into specific segments for those higher upper funnel metrics, there isn't a lot of necessarily slicing and dicing as it relates to that. However, I think what is interesting for Third Love and thinking back to the Bonobos and like brands that are multi-category brands in particular, I think when you think about the opportunity with TV and particularly with streaming platforms and other kind of like new to the market TV platforms, affinity interests and being able to reach audiences that align with that, depending on the content that you're running alongside, becomes important. So, I think for us, it's not, we know, for example, that our woman is into interior decorating, and we know that she's into, like home decor and gardening and that kind of thing. And so how are we looking for content that we can align with her in that way, whether it be at the broad perspective, like HGTV, or whether it actually be kind of run of shows specific shows that align with those affinity interests. And particularly as we think about like new categories like loungewear, is there a space and a place that we would amplify that? I think for us, to be honest, we found more success with that more targeted consumer focus and segmentation focus in places like YouTube, which, you go back to like, what is TV, where we started. YouTube has to be considered as part of TV too. Like when we think about YouTube, we're thinking about YouTube on, are we like, what is our brand lift looking like? And it's also that kind of hybrid of like, are we able to drive traffic from it as well? And you can absolutely use YouTube as a DR perspective. So for us, it's much more about that level.
Is it creative different for, say, a YouTube or connected TV campaigns where you're kind of micro targeting versus something more general or linear? Are you actually repurposing different creative and different channels?
Yeah, so yes and no. I think that when you're looking at channels like YouTube, where we are getting a little bit more affinity interest targeted, we absolutely are adapting the creative for what that affinity interest is and what that consumer segment is. Less so in streaming and definitely not in TV, because because it's still, or linear TV, it's still such a broad reach vehicle.
Got it. Great. We've had some questions come in throughout our chat, so maybe now's a good time to kind of go to some of these questions.
Cool.
Let's see here. So one question was, how do you see media partnerships, especially in TV, evolving over the next year or so?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think I'll go back to my answer about the linear streaming digital integration. Is that something that I think will, over the next year is a short period of time, but I do think that that's going to become really important, and people that can nail that and unlock it in the right way, or people, companies, will win from it. I think the other thing where there is a lot of opportunity if you get it right is, and comes back to being authentic and meaningful, and like giving someone something that keeps attention and makes sense, is show integrations. So this isn't necessarily like your traditional media buy, but I'll give you an example from Bonobos. We got in really early. It predated me, so I can't take credit for it. But we got in really early with the relaunch of Queer Eye for The Straight Guy, and integrated into one of those episodes in a way that was like meaningful to the content, meaningful to the brand, etc. And we not only saw a big impact on brand awareness there, but we also had people coming into our Bonobos guide shops, which were our stores, saying, "Hey, I saw you on Queer Eye. You're awesome. I want to try you." So there was actually a little bit of like a direct response component to it. And I think that kind of innovative way that you are being meaningful in something that someone's already engaged in, versus just tucking at them, will become more important. And if you could do that in the next year, that's
And
cool.
are you guys now at Third Love looking at doing those types of brand integrations,
Yes.
directly into shows?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Another question was around striking deals with media conglomerates. So, a lot of these media conglomerates now might have a CTV platform as well as classic linear assets. And the question was specifically, how do flexibility and fluidity impact how you approach deals with media conglomerates?
Yeah, so I'm going to read between the lines on that and maybe interpret a little bit, which is, I'll say what it means to Third Love. Like, Third Love is still a startup, and we are not, like, it's funny when you say the media conglomerates. I'm thinking back to my Coke days where we just like do massive buys with like, I keep referencing the Olympics, but like we were locked into the Olympics every year because we just had a big deal with NBC and the US Olympic Committee. So that's just what you did. And when you're at a DTC the size of Third Love, like, you're not having those conversations. And in fact, you are, because you want to be nimble, you're constantly thinking about, should I be locking into planned media that is like pre-bought and non-cancelable versus cancelable media? And I can absolutely say that is a tension within this company. That's a healthy tension. So at least how we approach it from Third Love's perspective is, what are the big bets we want to take? And maybe we take one of them or two of them going into, like, we're going to do a brand campaign, so we're going to lock that in. And, for us, that was Hulu. I mean, that's not like, at I think the scale that you're talking about, or this question was talking about, but for us, that was like the Hulu Women's History Month. We have a couple of conversations that are ongoing about big integrations for the fall, with new shows that are coming up. That's kind of where we take our bets. But as it relates to larger network buys, we kind of try and find that blend of like, okay, we're going to lock in the non-cancelable for, the Bravos of the world that we really want to make sure that we're on, because we know that she's there. Yeah. And then look for things like either scatter or cancelable media for other partners.
Another question here was around emerging media channels, right? So there's obviously more, channels emerging out there, different networks, both CTV and on the linear side. How do you approach these emerging media channels, and how do they factor into your overall strategy?
Yeah, so we always want to be exploring emerging media channels. For us at Third Love, it's about finding the balance of testing into things that are new, but understanding the capabilities on their targeting and the return on investment. So, I know this isn't related specifically to TV, but like, thinking about TikTok, for example, TikTok is obviously like not a new emerging channel, but kind of still an emerging channel. Like they still have some limitations with how you target and that kind of thing. And when you're talking about a brand that's like basically 100% targeted at women, that's a consideration with how we think about spending our time and our money on doing something like that versus either something more traditional or another emerging channel where we actually might be able to test a test return on a shorter time horizon. So that's kind of a very specific answer, but on aggregate, we really take the like very, tried and true 80-20 approach, where 80% of our buys are within, what we know has worked for us in the past, or we know has worked for someone else in the past. And then 20% of our buy is something that's entirely new. Like this isn't really emerging either, but like we did a big integration with Bustle and Romper for the Your Boobs Deserve Third Love campaign. And quite frankly, we had never really done those digital partnerships before. And also testing into things like YouTube, the creators, brand creators, like influencer content, et cetera. We think about like, how are we balancing that mix? Do we have enough that's really going to like drive the results that we want no matter what, because we know it's tried and true, but like, let's take 20% of that and like thoughtfully throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
Yep, and see what works. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. The next question is a bit more tactical, and it has to do with under delivery. So do you value linear and digital delivery at an equal level? And do you allow linear under delivery to be made good on digital? And if so, is there some type of limit around the amount that can be made good in that way?
It's interesting. So, we've only run one campaign since I've been at Third Love, so I can like be completely honest about that. And also, at Bonobos, we've been in a lucky situation where we haven't under-delivered from our linear perspective and been in the place where we need to make it up with digital. But I do think, going back to what we talked about before with everything being interconnected and you can't necessarily look at channels in a silo, that there is the ability to make that up in digital. I think that where it's not apples to apples is going back to kind of that sheer reach perspective, is like, are you able to truly get the same kind of reach out of digital, and because it's a different kind of engagement than you did in linear. But long answer short, yes, I do think that there's flexibility because everything is integrated. But luckily, in my short history of Third Love and what I experienced at Bonobos, we weren't.
And on the CTV side, I would imagine the answer is definitely yes, right? I mean,
yes,
many might even call CTV digital, right? Is it digital? Is it TV? I mean, who knows what the classification is. Yes, I would say that. But I will say that the consumption habits and occasions and ways that people are interacting with and consuming media between CTV and digital are slightly different. So you just have to take those differences into account as well. Got it. Here's a good question. Has the COVID crisis forced any modifications or changes to your short-term and long-term strategy at Third Love?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I can actually speak to kind of what went on before I got to Third Love. So I think that during COVID, there was a huge opportunity to drive efficiency with digital channels. And really, there was just an industry-wide pivot to let's focus on performance marketing and how are we driving that sale? Because consumers, at least at the beginning, weren't necessarily in the mindset to be buying bras or thinking about pants. And when they were there and you could serve them up an ad that they felt relevant, you could convert them at a much lower cost. I can speak to both Bonobos and Third Love. That was a pivot that we took at both of those. What has changed over time, and as the pandemic has gone on, and you've seen a lot of engagement, particularly within the intimates and essentials industry, and the kind of proliferation of options here, is that brand building is becoming more important again. And so, while during COVID there was this kind of shift to like, how can we drive performance and capture the low hanging fruit of spending our media dollars in digital channels where a lot of advertisers had pulled out of. Now everybody's starting to shout again and has done that like since the beginning of the year, end of last year in a lot of ways. And so that's why we're pivoting. That's why we're having this conversation right now, because we're investing in brand again to ensure that we're top of mind as consumer confidence rises, as people have more money to spend, as hopefully people get back to work. So that's kind of the arc of what we've experienced. But I will say that the efficiency that we were able to experience over COVID, it's something that we're balancing the brand and the efficiency in, I think, a better place as a result now.
Got it. That's great. Well, why don't we close out on this one? I guess last question. So I mean, there's been such a proliferation of so many D2C brands coming to market, and so I guess at the end of the day, how do you ensure that Third Love can stand out from the clutter of just so many brands kind of being launched to market? What are some of the, I guess, keys that you would tell the audience out there for any brand, and particularly how they can leverage TV to do this, to stand out clutter?
Yeah, so that's a good question to close on, because it's definitely something I think about every day. When I think about Third Love, as I mentioned, it launched as a pioneer in the industry, and now the proliferation of Me Too's and in the category is crazy. I think it was like there's 20% increase in competition. I just saw that stat year over year, like
wow,
nuts. So what we can do, I think it's all about how you can be unexpected, how you can show up and be unexpected to punch above your weight. So for Third Love, I know we didn't talk a lot about Bonobos, but like for Bonobos, like the most successful campaign that Bonobos had over the arc of when I was there, and I think that predated it, was our Evolve the Definition campaign, which didn't even talk about, that Bonobos sold menswear, but talked about what the definition of masculinity was. And the media buy was an insurgent media buy where we ran a 90-second ad at the start of the ESPYs, arguably the most masculine event of the year. And really broke through in that way to be unexpected and like get people to stand up. And from a Third Love perspective, we're really thinking about how can we stand out with our messaging? So the whole Your Boobs Deserve Third Love campaign, it was very tongue-in-cheek, lots of fun puns about boobs, very authentic and relatable, and in a way that you won't see like a Victoria's Secrets ad that's like all perfect models, or some of these other brands that are like kind of become all table stakes just about inclusivity and women's empowerment. Like, how can we use humor as a tool to break out? So that's where you can kind of engage your consumers. And that's what I'll leave it on, because I think Emily's here to say we're done.
It's a great ending.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was obviously a great note to end on. I'm a huge fan of Third Love, and I feel like they stood out to me with, all of the half size inclusivity and just, the campaigns. You see such a wide variety of, people represented, which you did not historically see in some traditional, lingerie brands. So, so great to have you here and hear your insights on the future of, TV and this space. And thank you so much, Mike, for being such a great moderator.
Thank you, Emily, for the time, and Colleen, thank you so much for the conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Emily, and thank everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Hope to have you guys again soon. Well, huge thanks to Colleen and Mike for kicking off our program today. We so appreciate having them here to share their insights. And next up, we're going to be hearing from two of our brand innovators' favorite past sessions speaking on the future of TV and media. So first up, we have Erin Goldson, the brand manager for Dove at Unilever, joined by Adam Caddett, the director of private programmatic advertising sales at Zynga. Enjoy.
The perfect background for today.
All right, guys, have a great session.
Thank you. Marty, thank you, and thanks to Brand Innovators. Great programming as always. I really liked the last session with Heather and Victoria. Erin, great to see you today. Our topic of discussion is the future of media, emerging media channels. Before we do that, could you tell us a little more about the specifics of your role? Because I think that'll set the scene very well for our listeners today.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. So I am Erin Goldson. I'm a brand manager working on Dove, which is one of the many brands under the Unilever umbrellas. We have Dove, Shea Moisture, Tresemme. So I have the privilege of working on Dove, and I'm in a hybrid role. So one half of my role is really focused on the purpose work that is really the growth engine of Dove. So anytime there's a campaign that isn't specific to a product and more around kind of our point of view on beauty, we believe that beauty inclusivity, showing different versions of beauty is very important. So that's what I work on the purpose side. During COVID, all the campaigns around Black Lives Matter, some of the campaigns we did around COVID, that's something that came out of the purpose team, which we call master brand internally. So overlooking all the different categories and kind of coming up with different communications that can work across, whether that's Theo's hair, et cetera. And then the other aspect of my job is I'm also on the Dove Hair innovation team. So that's all around looking at white space opportunities, seeing what our competitors are doing, and figuring out what the future of hair innovation is going to look like. So literally creating products from start to finish, brainstorming what that packaging is going to look like, what the proposition is going to be, working with supply chain, working with the R&D, and then really bringing that product to market for our consumers.
Thank you, Erin. When we talked before, it was great to speak with you earlier this week to get a sense of what you're working on and how you're evaluating, emerging media channels. Heather and Victoria were just talking about Clubhouse and experimenting there and trying to connect with consumers in different ways. And then also your sort of tried and true, more mature platforms are evolving. The use case for them is changing. But regardless of new or sort of mature platforms, you talked about the lens of purpose a moment ago. Can you tell us sort of from a high level, sort of how that's the ethos of Unilever and Dove, and how you're using the lens of purpose to evaluate how you A, communicate with consumers, and then B, how you decide to use different platforms?
Yep, so I think as a company, Unilever, one of the things we often say are brands with purpose grow. And so we've been tasked to look across all of our different brands internally. So whether that's Dove or other brands, really evaluate where they are in their purpose journey. So a brand like Dove for Unilever is one that's a lot more established. I think people think of us when it comes to purpose. Usually we are case studies that people look to, or even a brand that even internally, I'm constantly getting asked questions on KPIs. How are you guys measuring purpose and learnings there? So I think it's nice because for Dove, this has just been something that we have done for quite a long time. And it's really this idea of making the idea of beauty universally accessible to all women. So that's showing women with different hair textures, different skin tones, different body shapes, different body, really making sure that we continue to expand on that definition of beauty and portray that not only in front of the camera with the campaigns that we're working on, but also behind the scenes, making sure that we have diverse advertisers and agencies that we're working with. And so as we look at different media and channels, I think for us, the hardest thing is a lot of times purpose assets and getting that purpose message can't always be done in 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Finding long form channels and ways to help really tell that purpose story is something that we've been leaning into. So it's a mix of using the traditional channels like TV, et cetera, but then also leaning into PR and organic content to help share those longer form assets where we can give a bit more background and share a bit more on what that purpose and our point of view is. So for us, it's that storytelling. It's not just selling an ad with a quick display, a display unit, but really thinking about how can we tell impactful stories. And the way we look at it from a Dove perspective is we kind of think about it in 4 different pillars. So we have the brand say, that's what the brand might say. That might be your typical advertising. That might be a print ad, a YouTube spot, but it's all things that the brand is saying about what purpose means to us. Then we have the brand do. We believe that it's easy to say, I stand for hair inclusivity, or I stand for diversity in front of the camera, but making sure that you're actually putting action behind what you're saying. So again, when we think about channels, it's not always the typical, like I think we've really started to bend the rules there. So one of the initiatives that I'm leading is our work on the Crown Act. So Dove is a proud co-founder of the Crown Coalition, which is a group of 3 other organizations that are championing anti-hair discrimination. And when we think about channels there, we're actually working to make legislative changes. We have to work with lobbyists. We have to think about what are different ways to get our messages out so that we can make sure that the work we're doing is also impacting legislation. That's just an example. And then back to the framework. So we have brand say and brand do. So the legislative change will fall under brand do. And then we have what's called others say and others do. How can we use the voices of others to help get the mission and purpose of Dove out? So an influencer or a partner might be an example of an other say. How do we use their equity to drive that brand that brand purpose along?
So you mentioned obviously purpose is the core of everything you do. Has that ethos evolved over the past year, or sort of going back to your pillars on the how, when you're trying to activate your influencers or your larger Dove community? Is that constantly changing these days?
Yeah, I think we're constantly trying to push ourselves further when we talk about purpose and what that looks like. And one of the things we talk about is this idea of being an actionist brand. And so if you look at how our purpose has evolved, again, it's always been the core of the brand, but I think this whole pillar of brand do and others do is more critical, more than ever for Dove. So I think at one point we were more of just saying, like I think one of the iconic campaigns is our Real Beauty campaign that was in Times Square, where we showed women of all shapes and sizes. There wasn't necessarily a do associated with that. If that were to come out now, we'd probably be looking at, is there any legislation we can do, or is there any type of training and curriculums that we can do around body inclusivity, making sure that we actually have tangible actions beyond just the campaigns that we're running. So I think that is something that has been exciting to see, that like we are doing things like changing legislation. We talk internally a lot about how changing legislation, changing laws changes lives. And I think that's a space that we're leading into a lot more, is not just showing the campaigns on TV, but making sure that there's work behind the scenes that everyone might not even be aware of, but is critical to the work and the messages that we're doing.
When you've been activating and seeing success with this sort of this actionist audience and consumer, are there newer platforms or partners you've been able to team up with to see any sort of success? And how are you measuring that? Is it signing petitions, having consumers take action? Are there any other, back end metrics or measurement you're also looking to here?
Yep. So, for example, some of the work that we're doing around the legislative work, every year we track kind of what are the states where we want to see laws change. What are the states where we think we'll be able to have immediate success? What are the states that will kind of come at a later point? And we track that. We see how we're doing. If you go to thecrownact.com, and on the right-hand corner, you can find the petition. Right now we have a little over, I think it's 254,000 signatures. Our goal for this year is to get 500,000 signatures. So how do we get people to not just watch our ads, but when they see what we're putting out there, they're actually taking an action to help support us in the work that we're doing. And then on top of that, we also have a lot of brand metrics we're able to look at. So are people associating the work that we're doing with Dove? What is that association? And then there's a number of other metrics that we look at. So we actually have metrics where we can look at how is Dove's purpose evaluated against competitors. Are we growing in that space? And then we also can look at different audiences. So how are our messages resonating with maybe the general market consumer versus the Black consumer? We've noticed actually that with the A consumer, they really are the ones who over-index in believing in what Dove says when it comes to our purpose, when it comes to our communication. I think they are a consumer that has grown up on Dove with Dove and using that in their households. And I think we continue to build trust with that demographic.
So with these actionist groups that you're building trust, are you finding they're able to also, they're sort of being their own micro influence and amplifying the work that you're doing, whether it's in their own household or their social groups?
Yep, exactly. It's almost these mini micro influencers that we're not paying, but feel very strongly, feel passionate about the work, and they're sharing that. And that's also something we look at is how do we actually get our Dove community to engage in what we're doing, share our messages, and get that word out within their own communities.
Well, we already have some good Q&A I wanted to quickly touch on before we moved on. Someone asked, do you research the demographics of different media platforms outside of age, geography, race, religion, nationality, etc.? How does it inform the content that you're creating around these programs and then you go syndicate?
We research, so looking at demographics beyond race.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, so maybe more like psychographics.
Yeah, that's what I think they're getting at.
Yes, I mean, we have an incredible media team. We work very closely with Mindshare, and it's nice because they work across all of our brands. So we have lots of data on these platforms in terms of who is that consumer. We try to cut our data in terms of, like, we want to reach consumers who want to take action. We look for purpose seekers. We find a way to cut the data so that we are finding the platforms where we can reach this type of consumer. And then in addition to just the platforms, it's really the targeting within those platforms.
Got it. Thank you. Something I want to sort of move ahead to, because I know this is going to have a lot of good questions. You mentioned launching brands from start to finish and everything in the middle, and you launched a new hair care brand in the middle of COVID, which has to be an immense challenge within itself. Can you walk us through sort of how you went from ideation to actual products on the shelves this year, and what were the successful platforms in order to, reach consumers and have them, buy a new product in the middle of a pandemic?
Yep. So I led the creation. Let me move this Q&A section down. Lots of great questions. I led the launch of a range of products from Dove called Amplify Textures. So again, selfishly, as a Black woman with natural curly textured hair and a number of friends in the same group, I noticed that there was a white space opportunity. We didn't have, while our products, we have shampoos, we have conditioners that can be used with all hair types. I knew that, especially for the Black consumer, they want to make sure that products are created specifically for their hair type in mind, even though maybe our general market conditioner could work just as well. They want to understand that the product was created for them, for their hair texture, with that in mind. And so it was really exciting doing lots of different workshops, trying to get into the consumer mindset, taking myself out of it and really understanding what is it that they're looking for from a product standpoint, and what could Dove do to help close this gap. And I think what was interesting is when we look across all of our categories for Dove, as I mentioned, as a brand, there's a strong affinity with the A community. And we noticed across all of our categories, whether that's body, EOs, everything but hair, over-indexed with the Black consumer. And so that also helped validate that there was a need for more of a tailored solution to help capture the consumer as it relates to Dove hair. And so, like I said, we had a number of different workshops. We had ingredient workshops. We worked with real women, Black female editors, influencers to gain their input. And so I worked on everything from looking at the packaging, coming up with the names and the products of the SKU, what was on the front of pack, to back of pack, and even the commercial shoot. I think the sad thing with COVID was some of the assets and some of our media plan did have to cut. There was a number of media cuts happening across the organization, and I'm sure a number of other brands and organizations saw that same thing happening. But what was interesting was that during COVID, because of salons being closed, we actually found that this consumer was at home experimenting and trying new products more than ever. And so while we unfortunately couldn't have the full media plan that we had initially planned on, we did see an opportunity where consumers were just going in the store and trying new things on their own. And one thing that we launched was this program called Wash Day Live, where we partnered with celebrity stylists and our influencers every week to give new tips and tricks for this consumer to try at home. So whether it was showing how you could cocktail and mix our different products together, or showing a new hairstyle, this is a really cool opportunity for us to engage with our consumer in a new way. So we used Instagram Live and really use this moment. I think we knew that people were at home, they had time, they weren't doing as much, and we knew that this consumer really values the advice of experts and influencers. So again, instead of this coming directly from Dove, we could have put out commercials and kind of things in traditional media. It was leaning on the others say and their credibility to help drive purchase of the Amplify Textures line.
So it definitely seems like in order to, be authentic, there was the rigor in the creation of the product itself, and then also working with your influencer community and Instagram Live. With Instagram Live or anything you've done in the social channels in 2021, has there been a large e-com component to that as well? So in the virtual salon example, are there any opportunities for consumers to learn a new hairstyle or learn about a new product and also purchase as well?
Yep, so we had purchase, and a nice part of another component of this Wash Day Live program was we partner with a number of hairstylists locally across the US, as well as there's an app called Swivel Beauty. So basically they have access to a number of different hairstylists. And so what we did was we paid the stylists. We recognized that they weren't making money with salons being closed, and we paid them to have virtual appointments. And then that would be an opportunity. So it would be something just like this if you were my stylist, and we could talk about questions I had at home. And then as part of that, we were driving to e-commerce. They spoke a lot about the Amplify Textures products, and then would drive to e-commerce as a way for the consumer to buy products.
Very interesting. And I am very impressed how the success of the program, given all the changes in media consumption and just human behavior over the last year. Something I want to talk about is the importance of retail partnerships, retail media, and even in store. And when we spoke before, you mentioned that second to TV, in store is still to this day one of the key drivers of brand awareness. So when you're launching a new product, that is key. But then you also mentioned before, and we were able to catch up earlier this week, that the retail space and partnerships are also, it's almost like a 360 partnership. They help you push product, but also drive the purpose and actionist messaging home. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep. So again, as I mentioned, purpose is really the core of Unilever as a brand, and Dove as well. And so as we look at all of our channels, so whether it's social, whether it's TV, we did realize that TV after TV in store drives number 2 for awareness. And so now we've been looking at what more can we do in store to help bring to life our various purposes. We have a Dove self-esteem program that we partner with retailers to do in-store displays. The work that we're doing around the Pound Act, we're actually going to have a display at Walmart in June. So pretty big in-store unit, prominent space, and we're going to actually put QR codes on that display to ask consumers to go sign the petition. Again, spread the word on what I was doing. But when you think about all the traffic and the captive audience that you have in retail, it really has been a key awareness driver for us, especially because a lot of times those consumers are going there looking for specific Dove products. They're quite familiar. I think it's different when you're looking at social media and people are scrolling, but when you're in that in-store experience, a lot of times people will take that extra time to stop and look and read and look at the messaging.
What is, I guess, from your personal perspective, what does the in-store experience look like moving forward? A lot of states are starting to open up. New York is opening up. I'm very happy about that. What is the in-store experience of the future? Is it the same as it previously was, or is it more of a hybrid, maybe a buy online, pick up in store?
I actually think, but when I think of, so we work with a lot of the mass channels, so the Walmarts, the Walgreens, Target. I think when I think of a retailer who's really getting it right is Target. They're leaning more and more into the beauty and experiential space when it comes to in-store. And I don't think people are shying away from that with COVID in the world opening up. I think these mass retailers are learning from the Sephoras of the world that people who like beauty and like these products, they want to experience them in store. They want to understand what they're buying and not just this sterile environment, but I think more and more experiential and bringing a little bit more of that emotion and beauty in store is going to be critical.
Emotion and beauty. Do you think some is lost if you don't have sort of the tactile or visual experience, like a Sephora or not Target is growing in store? So some of the true sort of brand value or positioning is lost if you can't physically be there and sort of touch and experience.
So it's funny because we also talk a lot about the digital shelf and how when we talk about in-store and retailer experience, it needs to evolve beyond not just thinking about how are we going to launch a product in person, but also what is that going to look like digitally, and the two should work together. We spend a lot of time whenever we're launching a new product, we talk about our 7 OA, our 7 omni assets, making sure that the digital shelf, we have strong images of front of pack, back of pack, images explaining how to use the product and what it goes well with. There's a whole strategy that we work on when also launching not only in store, but also from a digital standpoint.
What advice would you have to other marketers, whether it's a legacy brand or an emerging brand and marketing team, to sort of try to replicate and balance what you were just mentioning, sort of the sort of yin and yang to the in-store and online experience? What are the sort of the key things our marketers listening today should take away and remember moving forward?
I think it's a basic one, but I think it's something that we struggle with all the time, but is really being clear on what that single-minded messaging is, and how does that message change depending on the channel. So if there is something that we're doing for TV, what is that message? What do we want consumers to take away? What do we want them to do? What does that look like in store? What does that look like for our influencers? I think that is something we're constantly doing, is trying to think of, consumers aren't going to spend much time. And so making sure that that message is tailored per channel, but still consistent across the overall campaign, I think is something that we constantly are taking a step back and asking ourselves.
So as there's an explosion of new channels and different types, which Clubhouse is getting a lot of press these days, rightfully so. Are you evolving your sort of brand mission statement and sort of the idea of purpose continuously so that you could invest in reach consumers in new channels? Because I'm imagining that not in every case does the channel align directly with your overall messaging.
Yeah, and again, like I was saying in the beginning, I think the struggle with purpose messaging is a lot of times when we look at, I mean, I've been having these conversations even yesterday with our media team, as we look to launch some of our new campaigns, we're talking, a lot of the inventory is around 15-second digital video buys, 6-second digital video buys, trying to consolidate a message that might take a minute to really tell the story and tell the power and tell the emotion. How do we get that to translate? And I think that's why some of these channels like a Clubhouse, I'm very, very interested to see what brand, I know brands have already started to do things there, but how do we find more of these avenues to have more conversations? So I think Clubhouse is interesting. We're currently working on a new podcast, a branded podcast with a prominent content creator. how do we look at different ways to get those long form messages out? But Clubhouse is one, and I think probably many have mentioned that today, is one that I'm quite excited to try. I've noticed, I think it was a couple weeks ago, they just hired 2 people, one on the media side and one on the marketing side. So I think they're starting to build out their team, and I'm really curious to see how they're going to start partnering with brands. But I would love Dove to be on that list, and hoping to pilot a couple ideas in the coming couple of months as well.
I would love to see that. Earlier, I want to go back to something you just mentioned earlier. You talked about the importance of PR, and whether it's your purpose-driven marketing or your overall brand voice, the best way to get that across to your consumers is through longer form content. But not all of the media channels that consumers are spending all their time on today allow for that, which you just mentioned. So are you using channels like the Snapchats of the world or other social channels as like almost a trailer or teaser to then direct them to maybe a site or other property where you have all that long form content?
It's funny you say that, because we have a partnership and some exciting work coming out soon. I can't give it all away, but basically we're partnering with a music label actually to create a music video. So it's an iconic song that's been out for some time, but the song came out before the time of music videos. And so it's funny when you said the trailer idea, because that's actually how they launched. That's part of their launch plan, is kind of launching a shorter form mini trailer and then teasing people before the long form comes out. So we'll actually be taking that strategy that is typically seen in the music industry and maybe for TV shows and movies, and we're going to be applying that to Dove. But yes, we've used Snapchat, we've used some of the smaller form, and I think the nice thing about those channels, like the TikToks and the Snapchats, is the younger audiences are very, very action oriented. They're more diverse than ever. They care more than any of the other cohorts about these different diversity initiatives. And I even read, if you looked at TikTok users were more likely to join in a Black Lives Matter protest than anyone else. So I think when you think about who is on these different channels, we do notice that they very much are in line with what Dove as a brand stands for. So those actionists, those who want to take charge, make change, we're really seeing that from the Gen Z and the younger consumer, which has been great about engaging some of the other newer channels.
So I'm glad you mentioned that about the TikTok audience. So when you're communicating with them and developing and building enthusiasm and passion for things like Black Lives Matter, is that conversation siloed within only TikTok, or are you able to bring them to some other channels, maybe some of your own content or own properties as well, or is it a lot of different siloed conversations?
And to be completely honest, I think TikTok is a channel that we're just starting to dip our toes in. So we're even behind there. And last year when we launched, we had a response to what was happening with the Black Lives Matter protest and George Floyd. We had a whole campaign called America the Beautiful. And the idea was that America won't be beautiful until it's beautiful for everyone. But we made sure that we tapped our influencers for that campaign. We did TV, we did, it was very much a 360 campaign versus just siloing and focusing on one channel. And that's typically our approach, is making sure that we're really surrounding our consumer across a number of different earned and owned channels.
I like that concept of sort of surrounding the consumer and having a lot of sort of parallel or different conversations that are tailored to each sort of media channel that you're working with. We only have about 5-7 minutes left. So if any listeners have any other questions, please input them to the Q&A function. But something I wanted to sort of ask you about, or in sort of, where's the biggest change that you found or most effective new media or channel to drive action from this actionist audience? You mentioned TikTok, but is the overall behavioral shifts you've seen around social justice issues, or even during COVID shopping, is that going to be consistent from here on moving forward, or is that something your brand purpose is to keep that passion going, if that makes any sense? Is that something you guys have to work to keep momentum on, or do you see the momentum here to stay?
I hope the momentum is here to stay. I think everything from the Stop Asian Hate conversations to what was happening during the last year with the Black Lives Matter protests, I think it's been nice because I think we are having significantly more conversations internally. It's unfortunate that, and not just internally, not just at work, but amongst peers across companies, I think it's allowed for a lot more conversation. And I think the nice thing when we even think about emerging media, some of it's taking the media that we've always had, but consumers, what I noticed last year were consumers were taking a stronger stance. There was a campaign, I think it was called Pull Up or Shut Up. And it was a whole Instagram page where this woman was basically asking companies, show us how diverse your boards are, show us how diverse your leadership is. So taking channels that have kind of existed for a long time, but really putting pressure on different companies to be transparent. And I think that to me what is what's been the most exciting is how these different channels have really allowed consumers to participate with brands and corporations in ways that we haven't ever before. And they're really holding us accountable. And there are times when we're called out, and I actually love it because sometimes there's things that I've thought about or things that I haven't known, it's been hard to articulate, but I think it's great when consumers are using these channels, not just for us to advertise to them on those channels, but also hold us accountable, push us to do more, and kind of call us out on making sure that we continue to walk the walk.
Yeah, I'm noticing a lot more of that. You're seeing that today with all the legislative action in Georgia. A lot more CEOs and brand leaders are having a voice, which is great to see. But it also seems that sort of brand messaging now is beyond sort of the product value, beyond sort of the parallel benefits of Dove Hair. It's now to sort of your core as an organization. So it's definitely interesting to see that evolution. So as we sort of begin to wrap up, take things back to sort of a more personal level, has there been a sort of major shifts for yourself in terms of how you're shopping, your media consumption, and are you applying any of what you're experiencing yourself to your job and your brand building activities?
This is probably like the worst time for me to be on a panel like this because I've been trying over the last month. So I've been working in the Caribbean. I'm trying to take advantage of this work from home, work from anywhere life. So I've actually been working in the Caribbean for the last since end of February. And I've been trying to disconnect a bit from media. So I haven't been on Instagram, haven't been going on as much. So I'm probably not the best person to be asking right now. I've been trying to disconnect and really, really focus on those in-person, whether it's in person or speaking on the phone or reconnecting more. Because I think because of COVID and being at home more, it's just been very easy to get caught up on your phone. And I've been trying to monitor my cell phone usage and digital usage. So I'm almost reverting a bit at the moment. Is trying to, which makes it harder for work. I'm like, I don't think I'll be able to continue this that much longer. But I was doing a bit of a month and a half cleanse just to really, really focus. And I'm enjoying it. But I think being on the different social channels is where I do find a lot of inspiration for work, where I get ideas. I see what other brands are doing. I might read about it, but I feel like I almost am seeing what people are talking about more when I'm fully engaged in those channels. And I think Clubhouse is one in particular that I'm really curious to see how it evolves. I'm noticing that a lot of other platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn are trying to find a way to hop on that trend. And we've seen that before, where other brands took what Snapchat was doing and incorporated that into their platform. And so Clubhouse, that's one that I'm excited to see who's going to win that battle. Is Clubhouse going to be here to stay, or is Instagram or something else going to kind of take over what they're trying to do?
It's interesting you mentioned sort of cleansing electronically. Everyone, us and everyone listening, we spend all day on a screen. We're on a Zoom, on our email, presentations, and the TV. And if you look on LinkedIn, a lot of people post about taking breaks from media consumption. And as it seems like it's, fairly popular, or a lot of people are doing it, how are you still able, as of putting your marketer hat back on, communicate and make sure people are still aware of what you're doing, whether it's new product releases or your purpose-driven efforts? Is that where you're leaning into PR the most, so that regardless of what media people are consuming, they understand what you're doing?
I mean, I think for us, success is, obviously we can have a great media campaign, we can work with influencers, but I think the best work is when we create something and editors want to write about it, people want to share it. I mean, Nike had a great new maternity campaign that came out the other week, and I didn't even see that online. I read it somewhere, and then so I shared it with someone else, and someone else shared. And I think when people genuinely want to share the work that you're doing, I think that's really when the magic is happening. I think that's, and even with products, I think when it's a great product, people are they're gonna share with their friends and share with their community.
We have one more question come in, but I see Marty, so I think we're at time.
I always feel bad, like I come on and I'm like the guy on stage going, come on.
I think I know. I think when people see you're at sort of the end, they're like, oh no, I have to get this question in now. But unfortunately, we don't have time for that.
Of course. Well, Aaron, Adam, thanks so much for a great session. I really enjoyed it. Aaron, thanks so much for sharing about the 4 pillars at Dove. I thought that was really interesting in terms of how you're approaching that. I was going to make a wisecrack about the anti-hair discrimination, but I'm sure you really experience it more so than me, other than the follically challenged. But listen, it was really a pleasure to have you both. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and really appreciated you sharing everything, Aaron. And great questions.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, that was a fantastic session from Aaron and Adam, one of our favorites. So we wanted to share it again on this Future of TV program. And next up, we'll be watching one of our other fan favorites from Paolo Provinciale, the Vice President of Media and Data for Anheuser-Busch Inbev. And this one will be moderated by Siho Lee, the Vice President of Programmatic Sales at Unruly. Enjoy.
Well, good. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. So let me just get right into it. And Paula, you're the VP of Media at AB InBev, one of the largest U.S. advertisers. What does it mean to be the head of paid media for AB InBev? Can you tell us a little bit about your priorities?
Sure thing. So if I could summarize what I do in a couple of things that, the first one would be, coordinating all the media investment and the partnership for our portfolio of brands, and therefore making sure that, our brands and our product are top of mind for our consumers. We drive them to purchase and to choose our products, but also try to create unforgettable moments and experiences like what we've done recently in Super Bowl a month ago, but also what we've been trying to do all throughout 2020 during these unprecedented times, as many have called them, right? So reframing more what we do, just not as advertising and as an interruption, but actually as content. So that is kind of one of the 2 major focuses that I have. The other thing is, for me, is challenging what we do both internally and externally in the way we think about media. We purchase, measure, and optimize media to stay ahead of the curve, and actually, also to make sure that our investment has a greater impact. And right now, a big focus of mine on that front is everything that has to do with optimizing for viewability and attention, both in digital and in traditional linear TV space. So that's an area of focus
Before we move forward, I just have a message from our sponsor.
Awesome.
If you have an
So you
FSA
mentioned
account,
the Super Bowl,
chances are
which
you're
was
not
just
taking
a
full
little
advantage
over a
of it.
month ago.
So many people are unaware of how
Congratulations,
many
Tom Brady and the
everyday
Buccaneers.
purchases are covered by their accounts.
When I
Everything
look
from
at the
cold and
Super Bowl,
allergy
it's such an
medications,
iconic,
glasses,
high-value
tampons, and
production and a very expensive event to participate in. But AB InBev has been known to produce some of the most iconic commercials. I think of Budweiser, and one of my favorites is, "Are you up for whatever?" Can you explain to the audience a little bit about why the Super Bowl is such an important event to participate in? And can you talk a little bit about kind of what goes into the overall beginning to end production? Because I think that's super interesting for us to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Super Bowl is kind of a unique event on its own. Is probably the largest media stage in the world, and it's the only event where people actually tune in not just for the game but also for the ads, which is makes it unique on its own, and that lends itself to be a great platform for creative and innovation and everything you can do both from the creative side but also on the media side. We use it to kick off our year, to introduce new products that we're going to launch throughout the year, or broadcast the message for our large and well-known brands like Budweiser or Bud Light, if you will. The brands that we select to air during Super Bowl are all part of a very deliberate commercial strategy, as I said, right? The new innovations that we want to bring to the market, or the existing brands and the new message or tone that they want to set for the year. And this year we found out that not being in the Super Bowl for Anheuser-Busch, one of the Anheuser-Busch brand, is as makes such a loud noise as big as being in the Super Bowl. Budweiser was for the first time in 37 years did not appear in the Super Bowl, and therefore made in order to actually use those resources to support COVID vaccine efforts and the Ad Council, and that made a big noise in this space for good reason. But what you see in the in the 30 seconds or the 60 seconds of the Super Bowl ads is a work that we lead up to it for months and months. We work up to it for months and months, and we use it in a couple of ways, both to create that human connection with people that is important. It's not what your brand stands for and what people care about, but finding the great overlap between the two things that actually allow you to connect with your audience and make it relevant. But also the other thing is, we use it to leverage and flex everything that we learn so far. So in this Super Bowl, we leverage a lot of the capabilities that we picked up in the past year in terms of creating digital experiences, connecting everything to digital commerce and e-commerce, creating content, and many other things that by necessity we had to learn how to do in 2020, and then we brought it, we dialed up to the max for Super Bowl 2021.
Awesome. So when it's all said and done, when the scoreboard says 0-0 on the timing, how do you guys measure the effectiveness, whether it's through quantitative data or qualitative results, the impact and the success of your overall Super Bowl campaigns?
It's, as you said, it's a combination of both quantitative and qualitative metrics, right? From a quantitative side, you can use more established modeling approaches like MMM and other things like this, but also you can use the impact that you have in terms of space at retails or share of sales that you have in the weeks and the leading to, during and after Super Bowl in that sense. But also we use more qualitative ones like share of conversation, PR impression, sentiment, even completion rate or key message inclusion for everything that we pick up, because this allows us to optimize on the fly. The thing is that obviously it's a mix of art and science. You want to be relevant, you want to pick up the right level of conversation, dial up what's working and dial down what's not working, and then hopefully seeing those results also in terms of, as I said, sales, share, and a more structured measurement impacts like MMM and things like this.
Awesome. What's your favorite AB InBev commercial of all time?
Wow, that is a tough one to answer. It's like picking your favorite child. So what I can say is that so one thing that we had a lot of fun bringing to life this year, one campaign was the Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade campaign, and basically the film, the ad that we aired played on the idea that if life gives you lemon, you make lemonade. And because 2020 gave us so many lemons, Bud Light Seltzer decided to make a lemonade, and that was fun on its own. But then we figured out, how to best flex what we learned in the past year and connecting it 360 to many channels. So for example, as soon as the ad air, everyone that had Drizzly installed in their phone got a pop-up notification saying, hey, did you see the ad? We saw it. And when you clicked on it and you opened the app, you saw a rain of lemons that was coming down and taking over the homepage or the page they were opening. So, reflecting kind of the spirit of the commercial that just aired. And then when actually the broadcast came back from the commercial break, we used one of our billboards in order to zoom in on the stadium and the audience there. And there was a guy, a famous meme called Dude with a Sign, that basically held up a sign saying, when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. And so it translated, what we showed in the ad perfectly into the broadcast and brought it, into the game. And it's kind of funny because, there is one of my colleagues and member of our team that had to explain to the FBI why a dude with a sign with a bunch of lemons on it had to enter the stadium. And so it was funny, but it's definitely, a way that we use to blend the, blur the lines between what's advertising and what's actually the content and entertainment itself.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now, talk about the convergence of linear and connected TV. And I think I've seen about maybe 10 plus webinars or panels this week talking about the shift in consumption being trailed by the shift in ad spend. So, I think it's quite evident throughout the past year that connected TV consumption has extremely accelerated. And we are seeing a slight or a decent decline in linear television. Do you expect the budgets, the advertising budgets, to follow in the same trend as consumption is shifting?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. I think that we're still in the early stages, obviously, of these channels of connected TV, and there is a lot to be figured out. But the trend is inevitable, and I think that has it happened, for example, with mobile in the past or programmatic in the past, I think we're going to see the same trend. We see a spike in consumption and soon after, a catch up in terms of advertising spend and reshifting of the media channel allocation.
Yeah, of course. I think, it reminds me of back in the day when desktop versus mobile consumption, but all this
right
desktop. Now it's kind of, there's always a Mary Meeker e-marketer slide to reference in every discussion about where the spend's going. So,
right.
With the growth and disruption going on in the TV industry, there's still many challenges in connected TV, whether it's from pure execution or commercial or product technology. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges in connected TV as it is today that need to be addressed in order to help accelerate the shift from linear to connected TV spend?
I almost feel like I'm giving you a cliche answer when I say fragmentation, but it's actually, I think that's that, right? I think that there is fragmentation that it comes to life in different ways and different forms. So one is the inventory and the fragmentation of inventory itself. And, and that's the reason why starting even before we started dialing down on connected TV, we invested a lot in supply path optimization on the programmatic side, because it allows us to better navigate this space and understand how you can access the inventory in the most straightforward way, but also establish more meaningful partnership with all the players that were adding the highest amount of value in the value chain. So that is important, and the same problem exists also in the connected TV space. Data is another thing. Right now there is different layers and different capabilities in terms of data that you can put upon the buy that you do, depending on the partner that you have, depending on the channel and activation that you do, and therefore data also it was already challenged, and everyone is kind of wrangling with the user data collection and use of data in a privacy compliant way. But then when you add, also the different fragmentation from different partners that you work with and what you can use, add that extra layer of complexity. Measurement is another thing, right? And so thinking about, how you can measure your delivery, the pixeling, for example, that you can do, where you can do it, where you cannot do it, and other forms of validation, but also understanding how you measure the impact in the right way. And at the end of the day, the simplest way to find a path to scale is for advertisers to have the ability to find reach at scale in a consistent manner amongst all these elements, right? As I said, targeting, measuring, and all these kind of things. But as I said, these are all problems that we saw when the programmatic ecosystem started developing and becoming, a very meaningful channel for all the players in the space. And I think that we're going through the same process with connected TV. I think that the biggest mistake that an advertiser can do right now is not investing meaningful efforts and resources in figuring out this space. But yeah, the one thing that I think I'm a little afraid of also is the creation of more fragmentation, siloing, or walled gardens, if you will. And not just from, for example, what a YouTube might offer and the limitation that you might have on that front with the social players, or call it whatever you want, right? But also all the networks now offering some kind of degree of, digital stream, and the way they go about it in creating their ecosystem, their environment where advertisers can play, is going to make a big difference if they take a more of a programmatic open approach versus a siloed walled garden kind of approach that we've seen in other spaces.
Yeah, I don't think this industry needs any more walled gardens.
It makes two of us, yeah.
So I'm gonna pull back sports, because I think sports is such a strong standing pillar for television. I know AB InBev invests heavily in sports, especially football. Where do you see sports consumption going from a viewership standpoint between the different distribution outlets, whether it's going to go streaming or it's going to stick with the big major broadcasters? How do you see that playing out?
Well, that's a few $1 billion question, not even $1 billion question. But all right, let me take here an educated guess. I think that sports is going to follow the trend probably a little bit with a legward kind of with a little bit of a delay. But I think that, even what you see with Amazon and the Thursday Night Football with the NFL is one of the things that, show that sports is trending that way. And I was pulling stats late last year to see what percentage of sports watchers are actually streaming content. And it's growing year over year at a significant pace. And even this year Super Bowl, I think that streaming represented, I don't want to overstate it, but I think something between 12 and 15%. So there is a consumer demand for sure. And I think that, then the offer will follow suit to some degree. I think that, again, sports, as you hinted, is going to be a little bit, more of a stronghold of the linear offering for a little while longer, but I don't think that, we're going to see it stay exclusively on linear TV. I think that things are going to move, and at some point we're going to hit the tipping point where everything is going to migrate. But I think that, this is only the exemplification of the convergence that there is between a digital offering and a linear offering, right? There is not an out, if you will. And as I said before, major networks and partners are already offering, digital packages and offers that kind of blend what's available on linear and digital. So it's going to be an evolution. It's going to be an interesting one. But I think that we also need to keep an eye on ratings when it comes to sports. And what we thought that before sports were the last stronghold of ratings and strong watching behavior. Recent ratings don't actually prove against that, or live TV in general, if you will, right? And sports obviously being one of the biggest elements there. So it's going to be interesting to see how people continue to behave in coming out of more than a year of being locked at home and streaming everything and anything, to seeing how the next 12 to 18 months are going to evolve.
Got it. So, I have to throw a bone for the fellow sellers on in the audience. Can you share a little bit about the buying process for linear and connected TV at AB InBev? Is it mostly done during the upfronts? You guys pushing more towards digital, programmatic? Can you kind of outline how you work with your agencies and your in-house team to buy connected TV?
For sure. So we have long-term deals for sure, but we are a very meaningful player also in the scatter market. And the way we do we do our buys through our agency of record, Dentsu, is in a very structured and coordinated manner. What we use is a waterfall approach that basically takes into consideration qualified reach, pricing. But also, as I was mentioning before, we also now layer on viewability and attention metrics in order to understand where there are the opportunities for, efficiently priced inventory that gathers high viewability or high attention. And the interesting thing that we're doing on this front is that now we measure viewability not only in the digital space, but also in the TV space with a company called TVision that measures people in the room when my ad is airing. In the same way, they can measure attention as eyes on the screen when the ad is airing. So the concept of viewability is not foreign to the digital space, and therefore, what we have been doing for years on the digital space. But the interesting thing is now that we bring it to the linear space, or the connected TV space, right? So we create this waterfall that takes into consideration, as I said, on target reach, CPMs, and viewability. And now, I can create a VCPM. Viewable CPM, viewable qualified CPM, call it whatever you want. We're basically the partner or the channel that ranks the highest gets the first dollar, and then we go down the waterfall until either I hit the target reach or I exhaust my dollars. And the very interesting thing about it is that now we can put into the same ranker, networks and the different day parts. We can put, the YouTube of these connected TV partners and buys and programmatic buys that you can do. And the interesting thing also that allows us to break down the silo between traditional and digital in a way that we consider everything between TV and what we call TV replacement. And TV replacement is anything that, as I said, like connected TVs to TV replacement, but also a full screen experience on your phone is, I would argue, that gathers the same kind of attention and focus that you would have with a linear buy with TV, right? And so even if it's a smaller screen, doesn't mean that doesn't give you the lean back full on experience. And therefore, it becomes very interesting as you can put everything together, linear and digital, and you can actually measure and compare everything with the same metrics of viewability now, but then we're already working towards attention, and therefore understanding what CPM can get me a qualified audience that is actually attentive, and this is I think the next step in the industry.
So should we expect to see KPIs listed out as effective attention CPM?
Oh, that's my dream. That's my goal. I truly believe that attention should be a currency in the industry. And I'm really looking forward to work with a lot of partners, and I'm ready in the middle of the conversation to work with partners to understand how we can guarantee on viewability, both on the linear and digital space, but also on attention. and seeing what and how we can partner together for create more attentive environments where people have give more of their attention, and therefore these more attentive environment become more premium environment that command a higher price, which I'm willing to pay, because I think that without attention we're not going to have an impact. If you're not seeing my ad, it's very unlikely that my ad is going to have an impact on you, and then for a result I'm willing to pay a premium for that, because at that point I know that my ROI from my investment is going to be higher. So I think it's a way to align incentives in everything that we do from the buy side and the sell side in order to bring a better raise the bar in the industry, but also bring a better consumer experience, because in all of that it means that people are being more attentive and watching more carefully all the content that's served to them.
Got it. So you mentioned the importance of viewability in the digital environment or desktop mobile, and then attention for TV, connected TV. How much, it's for sure that strong creative plays an important part on driving those, viewability and attention metrics. Are you seeing a shift in creative production, whether it's as simple as just shortening a 30-second asset to a 6-second for a mobile OTT environment, or creating more personalized creative for connected TV because it allows for more unique targeting opportunities? Can you talk about how creative has changed now that there are so many different screens and devices where you can display and produce and distribute in AB and Bev ad?
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how much a new channel, a new technology allows it to become more creative. And I'm very lucky to work with the great brand teams, creative team, and creative agencies that really, when we partner together to understand the complexities and the nuances of that medium, the new medium that we're working with, and so me and my team lean in together with our media agency and try to lay out what that channel has to offer, then it comes back to iterating and creating together and figuring out what's going to work and what's not going to work. And so some of it is targeting and geo targeting that you can do with from a connected TV standpoint. We started, for example, in a large scale last year, Super Bowl last year, with one of our brands, Michelob Ultra Pure Gold, that is an organic beer, and they were launching a campaign focused on supporting organic farmers. And the insights there was that there's only 1% of organic farmland in the United States, and through connected TV, we were able to serve actually customize ads in each state, showing actually how many farms that were organic were actually present in the state, to make it so much more tangible and real, right? That insight. And so what Michelob Ultra then was doing in order to support organic farmers and contributing to the development, the conversion of organic farming for every pack that was bought. So that's one example. The other example is what we do with e-commerce, and so we see codes and QR codes that are embedded in the creative, so that people can actually engage and buy, and you can have this DR message to a TV creative that before you never had, right? So and you see how people start to lean in if you have a well curated experience around their needs. The other thing is, for example, we play with a kind of a choose your own adventure kind of creative where people could actually interact and
interactive creative within the that's awesome.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. That's how exciting it becomes, where you actually, you bring a new channel with new capabilities, and then you have brands and creative team iterating on that. And there is this synergy that you create between the media team and the media agency and the creative partners to create a new experience that hopefully will engage people and consumers more, and therefore command more of their attention and resonate better with them. So it's a virtuous cycle in that extent.
Awesome. Following this event, you'll have to send me a link to that creative. I would love to see that.
For sure.
So I think we have about time for one more question. I'm going to leave this as open-ended as possible. And I want you to answer this from the lens of a marketer at AB InBev, but also as a consumer. Oh, we actually have 10 more minutes. Well, let's stick to the question. So future predictions for 2021 for TV, connected TV, one as a consumer, and on the flip side, as a advertiser.
All right, so let me, I'll take the advertiser side as well, but I think it's infused in bed with everything that I observe also as a consumer. As we said before, streaming will keep growing. There is no question about it, and I think that what we've seen the past year will just accelerate. People are getting used to consuming content on demand, consuming content on their own devices. And therefore that will continue, but also streaming in the broad sense in terms of connected TV, OTT, and all these kind of things, and therefore casting from their device and all these kind of things from different apps. I think that as a result of that, ratings, I think, will keep declining because there is going to be a shift to more streamed content, and as a result of that, I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens when the country opens up more and people are going to be spending less time at home, and therefore more on the go, more with their friends, more doing all the things that they wish they could do last year they weren't, or in the past year they weren't able to do, right? So that will have a negative effect into, I think, ratings, and it's going to be interesting to see how the different broadcasting partners and networks are going to react to that. If keep on increasing the prices to quoting scarcity of inventory, right? Or they're going to take a different tack. All of this is going to create more of a divide between what we see on the linear space and the digital space. Right now, the state of play is that you have in the linear side, you have on average between 14 and 16 minutes of a commercial ad load per TV hour. And so when you compare that with the average of between 4 and 8 minutes, say 6 on the digital space, on digital streaming, that creates a very big divergence in the consumer experience. And therefore more and more consumer will keep on going to the more the better consumer experience. And so seeing that migration and see that rating migration and all this kind of thing. So I think that there is a bit of a vicious cycle happening there. But then we'll see how how the different players will try to react and mitigate to that. As we said before, a lot of the networks are offering digital packages and digital offers that are becoming more and more enticing over time. But I think that there is also the opportunity for them to lean on their content creation capabilities to add value for the brands, right? And figuring out how, again, brands can lean in and become more part of the content and less of the interruptions. Therefore, partnering with the networks to find new ways to create value, and therefore, commanding the bigger partnerships, the higher price, and all these kind of things. I'm also very interested to understand how the digital partners will react to that, right? And so understanding how can we get rid of that fragmentation that we spoke about before in the CTV space, but also how digital partners can actually figure out ways of creating better content, new content, and ways to engage with the audience and garner their attention. There's no 15-second ad pre-roll that you can offer me that's gonna be a TV network that adds me actually in the broadcast of the sports game or things like this. And so, but as we spoke about a minute ago, there are a lot of creative capabilities that you can do now with connected TV and many of the digital channels that make the user experience more interesting. So all in all, I think that it's going to be the trends that we've seen so far are going to continue. The interesting part is how people are going to react. I'm not confident enough to say how people are, the different players are going to react, but I think that as I said, there are going to be different approaches to it. There are going to be the people that are going to be a little bit more defensive and not willing to change the ways of doing business, and probably they're not going to be very well set up for the long term. And they're going to be partners that instead are going to be willing to experiment and share some of the risk and some of the cost of creating a better, newer experience. And I think that these are the people that I'm looking forward to partner with in order to actually figure out the future together.
Mm-hmm. So would you say the landscape will get more complex for marketers, or it'll get more unified and simplified?
Oh, for sure, more complex. And even think about, everything that is happening on a privacy standpoint, right? I think that we're in a position where we're literally going to take a step back in order to take a step forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, if you're up for the challenge, I think it's going to be very exciting because there is a lot that can be created and figured out and invented. So it's a great time to be. And I think there is a quote that roughly states something like, time will never, it's never been so fast, passing so fast, but it's never going to be this low, right? Kind of thing. And I think that we're, it's never been so true.
Yeah. So we fast forwarded to 2021 and beyond predictions. Why don't we take a rewind back to 2020? And I would love to hear kind of some of the adjustments you've had to make from both an organizational standpoint, a marketer standpoint, due to the challenges that came across us as individuals and as corporate brands such as AB InBev through the pandemic.
It's been quite a ride, right? Past 12 months, I guess, for everyone. We had to adapt, and adapting has become the name of the game, right? I think that we had to figure out from the get-go when the country started going in lockdown, understanding, how we change our media to be able to reach people where they were spending time. So this meant more on streaming, more on gaming, more on connected devices, and also leaning in more on e-commerce and shopper marketing and all these kind of things. But then leveraging more digital out of home versus static out of home, figuring out what to do with radio and all this kind of thing. So it has been very, very interesting. But then uncertainty was kind of the reality, and therefore keeping in close touch with all our partners and understanding what new opportunities were coming, how the environment was changing, and all these kind of things. It was very interesting also to adapt from a creative and a messaging standpoint, and not being tone deaf and delivering a message that was able to resonate with people. And a lot of work has been done from brand teams in order to be relevant in a tactful and a meaningful way, and from helping out with testing sites and blood drives to providing entertainment with live streams and all these kind of things. The adaptability that we had to force ourselves to has been definitely stressful, and it's been a challenge for everyone, especially in this new environment where before we thought we couldn't possibly work from home for an extended period of time and on VC, and we had to figure out a way, right? But I think that, as the saying goes, never waste a good crisis. And I think that this is a huge crisis for everyone and the whole industry. And I think that, the spirit of figuring out a way forward is taught us a great lesson and allowed us to pick up a skill that now we're going to be able to carry forward in future years. And I think that although through challenges and pain, we're all better as a result of that.
Yeah, with every challenge comes a learning experience. So
for sure.
Yeah. We do have one question from the audience. So from a marketer's perspective, is a digital minute more valuable than a linear TV minute?
That's a very good question. And there are possibly 15 different ways to answer this question, but I'm gonna take, most fundamental truth for me is, let's take a people first approach, a consumer first approach. Does it make any difference for a consumer when they're watching their TV, being these linear TV or connected TV? So you're watching, an on-demand, whatever on Hulu versus linear TV. In that case, the digital minute doesn't make any difference, because most of the time they don't even understand, they don't even perceive the difference between how it's served. So we have a lot of constructs that we have as part of our industry, and we have to break those barriers and those constructs. Now, If we're looking at what you can do with that digital minute versus that linear minute, once again, is very different depending on the context. As we discussed during our chat, right? You can have more targeting, more customization on the digital minute, but at the same time, there is a lot of content that gets created on the traditional linear minute. So the short answer is it depends, but I think that if we take the lens of what is going to be the consumer experience for people watching, that is what's going to give us the right way to evaluate that minute for as marketers and advertisers.
Awesome. Well, it seems like our time is up. Paula, thank you so much for the awesome insights and shared experiences. And Lauren,
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you both for being here. We'll hope you.
Well, another great session. So glad to share that with you all today. And we're really thrilled to introduce our final panel of the day. We are joined by Mary Catherine Woltz, the Director of Media Connections at Dannon, and moderating this session will be Andrew Troy, the General Manager of Sales at Dish Media. Looks like they're both hopping on right now. Hi there.
There.
Hi, welcome. Thank you guys for being here today. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, I'll hand it over to you and pop back in at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, MK, how are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you. I was worried about my internet was like in and out. It's starting to thunderstorm here, so just
yeah, we
goes awry. I don't know if that has anything to do with Wi-Fi, but for some reason I make that connection.
I had the same problems, and we had a lot of rain this morning. Now, hopefully, it's clearing back up. So good. So first, I want to thank Brand Innovators for allowing me to host this session. And it's great to see MK again. MK's works at Danone. I'd love to hear more about your role before we get into the overall topics during the session.
Yeah. So I am Director of Media Connections at Danone, and our goal is really to drive media excellence across our organization. We, are in charge of media strategy, media planning and buying, working with the agency and our brand marketers to really drive growth for our brands through media excellence. So I work across, mainly the brands in Colorado, which are all of our plant-based brands, Silk and So Delicious, Horizon Organics, as well as our beverages division, which includes International Delight, coffee creamers, as well as Evian, Stoke, and then of course we have our yogurt business unit as well. So we try to look at things from an enterprise strategy to then drive that down to our brand plans.
Awesome. Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and the marketplace is definitely changing. It's evolving rapidly. I think we've seen a lot of forums and panels outside of this one that is talking about a very unique upfront marketplace. And with that, how does Danone implement its video strategy for brand growth?
Yeah, I know it's, and I should have mentioned before too, it's like video has been one of the things that I've been focused on as one of my areas over the past 3 years since I've been at Danone, and before that I was agency side. But I laugh that it used to be a lot easier. When I first started in this business, it was, I had my TV plan and that was it. And it was like, check the box, move on. But, now it's so much more complex because the consumer is viewing multiple screens and multiple ways in. So we see video as a key channel within our media mix. It is a great reach driver for us in terms of driving not only base reach for our plans that we need to hit in order to drive our brand growth and see those results at the shelf, and within our brand sentiment and brand awareness. And so we are continuing to try to innovate within video. So with that, just meaning, yes, we have linear TV benchmarks that we want and do meet, but that's becoming more challenging, obviously, with how the marketplace is heading, ratings erosions, things of that nature. Obviously, many more touch points and ways in to view video, time shifting, of course, it started with, and then streaming, et cetera, and trying to reach a broader, more, I guess, diverse audience, I say, in terms of, yes, I have my demo linear audience, but then I know so much more about my audience in these other channels. So how do I continue to reach them? So I'd say it's a long-winded answer. For our ambition is to look at video holistically so that we can really understand and continue to follow the consumer, understand what's resonating with them most and how it's going to continue to drive our business. And by holistic, I mean, linear plus FEP plus programmatic guarantee plus programmatic, et cetera.
Yeah, there's a lot to juggle for sure. A lot to juggle these days. And we'll get to this later on. One of my questions I had for you, because you've referenced a holistic video approach, and I think measurement definitely plays a critical role when you're looking at video holistically. So that definitely is a challenge. But thinking about challenges, I referenced at the beginning 21, the 21-22 broadcast upfront year. Like, what challenges do you as a brand or as an organization face? I guess along with your agency.
Yeah, I mean, a key challenge for us, of course, is following the consumer first and foremost. I think also another one that we're faced with, just based off of business and how things have changed over the past year, is the need for flexibility and the need for us to kind of pull things in and out and shift around. And that becomes really hard with obviously linear TV and upfront deals. And but we want to be able to come into the marketplace with the best pricing, hit our goals, and continue to innovate. So those are like two of our key challenges. And we want to also, because of the shifting consumer behavior, the challenge is to figure out how to be in the mix of that, in the forefront, reaching our most valuable consumer, I guess, wherever they're watching. And that becomes complex because of, I think, how TV is traded, right? Based off, when you look at linear versus, other type of, I'd say, digital video from a programmatic standpoint or streaming, it's all different. So how do I go to market and tick all of those boxes and understand, how many times I'm reaching a consumer? How do I know I'm not bombarding them versus, within linear, you can kind of have a better gauge of how many times you're reaching them. But then if I have that plus everything else in that whole ecosystem, how do I measure it, like you were talking about earlier, and translate that to success and growth for our brands? So those are some of the key ones that are really top of mind for us. And then I'd say too, with ratings erosions and pricing increasing, that never, that whole concept is always hard for me. But that's one thing too that you have to think about for the future, to make sure we're buying the best media for our brands and can really, look at that, monitor it, see where it's going. And I think obviously we're seeing in the marketplace some different approaches, and I am curious as to how that's going to, shake out in the future and what that means for, different guarantees or different things that we have going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, guarantees is interesting. I was listening last week to an interesting panel, John Musinski, Gibbs Halligan and company, and they were commenting on guarantees from the linear marketplace on adults 18 plus. It's almost like we're taking a couple steps backwards when you're talking about reaching someone, within a strategic lens And that's what we're focusing on now too, is data, whether it's our first party data or third party data. The guarantee scenario in a linear marketplace is becoming interesting in the way that it's taking a couple steps back, maybe even decades back.
Yeah.
From that matter. So
yeah,
it's interesting for sure.
It is. It's very like I said at the beginning. To me it's complex, and I think there's a lot of moving pieces. And I don't know, the other piece that I think about, and we're relying on our agency partners as well as ourselves to push ourselves and to push the publishers and other video providers, that I don't know have it figured out, honestly, in terms of that holistic package and how they're going to sell it and what it means for the historical way that you've been able to buy TV. So I think it'll continue to evolve. So that part is exciting. I just, I wish somebody would tell me how to do it all. No.
So diving a little deeper now, we talked holistically, but diving deeper into the different lanes of media, how do you toggle, or what tactics are you using when you're using linear TV versus FEPs versus digital video, programmatic? The list goes kind of on and on today of short tail to long tail media opportunities. So I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. So over the years, of course, we've increased, I'd say, our FEP and to, I'd say, 5 to 10 to 15% each year, based off of which, we'd all talk about and know, which is following where the consumer's viewing video and with what's happening with ratings, et cetera. So we continue to do that. I mean, linear is still a large piece of where we invest. We have optimized our day part mix based off of our brands and our goals and what's, happening each year to be, focused in the most important inventory, and I'd say more premium inventory for our brands, to make that impact, but then also have a keen eye on efficiency as well. And, like I said, FEP increased year over year. And then this year we're starting to look into more, yes, we've done direct deals, but how do we do direct deals with programmatic guarantee so that we can, with some of those bigger TV publishers and networks, figure out how to look at frequency across our different audiences, importing in our audiences from our DMP versus just, targeting and guaranteeing off of a demo base. So that's one thing that is really important to us this year to incorporate as we go into some of the upfront plans and that kind of season, which is upon us now, is to figure out how to incorporate those so that we can be set up for, success in the future. And, on paper, you'd look at the percentages of kind of, the tactics per se that I listed, and you'd still probably see linear as a large piece of it. But, based on our results and measurement and MMM, that is our biggest reach driver for driving awareness within our plans. But we want to start to help pull consumers through the funnel and reach them at different points, especially using video. And I'd say, we're starting, if you get lower into the funnel and some of those video tactics, I'd say the other pieces we use are, connected sometimes more to retail. We do a lot of content partner integrations that can show up in the form of video to really, integrate with our creative campaigns. I feel like I could go on and on, but those are some of the key pillars that I mentioned of our mass video strategy of how we're trying to drive reach and sufficiency across our plans where we have this big impactful media channel.
Are there certain brands that use these channels differently?
There are. I'd say we, our largest brands Silk, as well as Oikos, Activia, Light and Fit, and International Delight. We look at linear TV from a somewhat similar mix from a day part standpoint, trying to get to sufficient GRP goals, obviously including FEP, and then from there also our programmatic, as well as including YouTube. So and it just varies based off of launches and seasonality and things of that nature. So we're trying to create more enterprise strategy across our largest investment to really have that best in class approach and way into market, and then driving it down from there. I'd say yes, across the different brands, there are different ways in from a video standpoint, where some brands might have more, content integration or a partnership with a large publisher that we're partnering together to create that content on each other's behalfs, right? So using that kind of borrowed equity. And then we're, doing other in-stream video, things of that nature with different types of partners as well too.
So I know we look at the broadcast linear space and traditional cable, just the traditional linear space in general, and benchmarks have definitely been well established for years and years now. But when you look at the digital video space, what benchmarks are you using to evaluate different partners or just the space in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a benchmark standpoint, of course, the linear TV is the, easy one from a reach and GRP perspective, of course. I'd say, obviously, when you get down to more of direct buys and even programmatic, of course, viewability is always a key metric, and how much does it cost for someone to actually view that. So I'd say those are kind of the, main ones. We're working on something right now too, where you mentioned, we were talking about content before, where we're trying to incorporate, it's part of our evaluation and metrics of, how can our video content come to life with a certain partner, if we're doing those things with a publisher in video form to help, like I said, create a platform. How do we use that as a part of our rubric and metrics to evaluate them? And then how does the consumer engage with that, right? And so some engagement metrics off the back of that as well. So, we're measuring our digital video within what we do from a market mix modeling standpoint each year with some of our brands. So taking that, seeing where video fits in, and kind of, that's where the art and the science come together of your brand goals and trying to really figure out, yes, it was proven in our MMM, but how do I continue to evolve and expand? We do different studies each year in terms of, understanding what's performing better, A/B testing, et cetera. So those are some of the key areas. Does that answer it mostly?
Yeah, and are you doing a lot of that testing and MMMs? Are you guys doing that in-house, or are you guys charging Wavemaker with those responsibilities?
We partner together and we utilize analytic partners to help us with our MMM. So we're, partnering together to do that. And then campaign by campaign, I'd say it varies, based off of what we're doing. If we're using additional vendors to measure, a brand lift or sales lift or things of that nature based off of what we're putting into market. So I'd say it just varies. We have an in-house analytics team that we also partner with very closely, and along with the agency and other external partners, to develop learning agendas across every media touch point. But for here, we're talking more so about video, to really outline what is it that we want to learn? What are those big questions that we have, whether it be about certain channels, certain audiences, et cetera. So we do a lot of work in the beginning of the year to set that up. And then also, course correct and evolve throughout the year to understand really what's on the forefront, what do we have in market to help us answer some of those big questions around what's going to be driving the best growth for our brands.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about following the consumer, and that seems to be a big theme across the board. Another big theme with that comes reach incrementality. That seems to be a really big strategic pillar as folks are entering not just the upfront marketplace, but just really their day to day. So, what is your overall strategy to garner incremental reach?
Yeah, I'd say it's, adding the things that we've talked about from video standpoint in terms of, yes, FEP, I think helps us do that. Connected TV. We also look at, obviously other channels, but from a video standpoint, I'd say those are the main ones. And publisher direct deals where we know, where we are reaching a different audience. I'd say also too, from an audience perspective, we've tried to play around with some of those details as it relates to, I'd say all of our different, we call them activation communities. So how do we target them in different ways to drive incrementality as well. And then, I'd say from a video standpoint, it really is looking at CTV, YouTube, additional publisher partners from a true video standpoint.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance because there is a challenge in the broadcast, the linear space where you talked about it before. It's just the decline in supply. The reach curves are plateauing a lot sooner than they ever had before. So it is about figuring out how to allocate your dollars to find those eyeballs. That is definitely today's overarching challenge, and where to do it because there are tons of places, and I'd argue reach. Dual reach, right? There's multiple places where you could reach that consumer across different touch points. So that is an overall opportunity and a challenge for marketers out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we're trying to, diversify in our marketing mix and really, understand what are those key drivers across every brand and every channel. Doing a lot of work right now around, sufficiency. We get sometimes in a habit of, I can just put up I'm making it up, but a week, 2 weeks of TV and be like, is that really going to make a difference? Or, and what certain levels do I need to be at so that we're not only spending our money, but we're spending it smarter. And we can really, attribute sales and awareness and brand growth through our media channels. So I'd say that's another piece that we've taken a keen look at the past, I'd say, year plus to really get those fundamentals and best practices in order for us and our organization so that we have those guiding principles so we can feel good about, the choices we're making and not, just because I have $100,000 doesn't mean I need to spend it in, I'm making a week of social. Could that be better spent in a, e-commerce, search campaign? I don't know, but, things like that to give us that rigor that we really are searching for within our media plan so that we can, strive for excellence and growth.
So a lot of players out there. We've referenced the different ways, different tools from linear to programmatic. But from your perspective, we look at leadership and innovation. Do you see a vendor or even a platform like doing it right, or maybe not, maybe it's not even doing it right. Maybe it's a platform or vendor that has the roadmap to solving or taking a leading role in innovation.
Yeah, I mean, from like, I guess I can answer it from a consumer perspective and then maybe a marketer perspective. Because as a consumer, if I'm, seeing the different, networks and content creation that's going on across the video world, I'm impressed, of course, by, the Amazons, the Netflix of the world. I'm impressed even like with how, Disney and Discovery have taken their streaming platforms separately as a consumer. Like I enjoy that. And I think that's where I go to get my content in addition to what is happening on, my network TV channel every night. So I think from that standpoint, it's like, there's so much to choose from that it's great. And I think that in itself is, just true innovation and creation and figuring out different ways to monetize based off of where the consumer is. I think that is probably more to come in some of those platforms, especially like Disney and Discovery, as those are kind of the Disney Plus specifically, those newer platforms. So, I think from that perspective of my, my own habits, I think that's really cool because that's what I crave and that's what they're delivering. I think that, so I don't know if I can name like one, but I'd say of all of those, I think there's really good things happening across multiple, I'd say, TV networks, content creation, e-com advertising platforms, creating content, that, I think there's just more that we can obviously choose from, which also makes our jobs a lot harder, and understanding, really the overlap and how do I play within each of these to benefit my brands best. But I also think with a lot of this, especially like content creation with, Netflix and even some of these, Discovery, Disney, et cetera, that you can't just buy ads on, that is interesting to me. And I don't think something that we've really cracked the code on is how do I integrate within those when it's beyond just a 30, 15-second spot. And I think that's something that we've, have interest in and want to figure out. It's just also hard to, I think, have the lead time sometimes to do some of those more like valuable brand integrations and things like that. So, I'd say that's where my head is there. And I think it will only continue to get hopefully more exciting in terms of some of these platforms too, where you can be more focused on your, you can today in a lot of them, but more focused on your some specific message that you're sending the consumer. So that really like addressability, dynamic creative based on that end user.
Yeah, it's interesting from a consumer perspective, it ultimately just comes down to the UI. And the ease of use. Like, am I able to find my favorite show or a show that I need, or, how is it a clunky experience? It really comes down to that. Some have perfected it. I think some definitely have work to do. I'll register my complaint to them through their website. Without naming any names specifically.
I was going to ask you which one.
No. I will not disclose that. I do sell one of the players, so I don't want bad karma.
I hear you.
But nor do I expect any. But anyway, you just talked about addressable and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question, considering addressable is the bread and butter of how Dish Media sells their inventory or their pool of audiences. Where do you see addressable overall fitting into your media mix?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it has I think addressable to me has a spectrum, I guess like a few years ago, or even like 5 or 6, I was working on, addressable TV campaigns, right? Using the likes of Dish and other other places when I was on the agency side to target that like household. And then now I think about it more in the aspect of what I would liken to what, dynamic creative, right? Or inserting into any media channel, not just TV, but that video experience where the message is personalized is kind of what that means to me now. So I'd say we are probably in the beginning stages of this. We've done some, dabbling in it as it relates to creating different dynamic content, all the way from search to, trying to do that on YouTube videos and things of that nature. So I'd say it's something that's definitely untapped for us and something we want to try and do more of because of, like we just talked about, how the delivery of what you want and what you expect. And really understanding that what creative or what even brands, I think if I take a step back and think about our portfolio and how much opportunity there could be, between, if I'm a Silk buyer, oh, did I know I had, Silk yogurt, or did I know I had, this other, if I'm not strict vegan, this other dairy product that might resonate with me. I feel like we have so much untapped, I'd say, opportunity to really kind of cross-sell and cross-pollinate across our branded portfolio, and really understand kind of those levers. But that's like way out there. for now, I think it's really within our programmatic channels, we have an ambition to deliver dynamic creative and really addressable creative based on our audiences. We've done a whole huge work stream the past year plus around, I know another hot topic is data and, cookies and all that kind of stuff. So we have worked tirelessly to get, a DMP, work with curating our own data, having less reliancy on third-party data, et cetera, to get us in that spot to where we can be eventually more addressable in our creative across the different channels that we're playing in. And I think within video especially, just like the versioning and the different capabilities across so many partners that we can do is really an area we want and are trying to dive into this year for sure. So it's important, and I think it can help us too.
Yeah, I mean, you talked in the very beginning of that about personalization, and that is becoming such a big key. You think about different generations of shoppers. Millennial is such a hot topic, or it's been for the past 5 or 6 years or so. But I also think, I guess I have a couple of them in my house right now, Gen Z. How do you market to them? Because personalization plays such a key role in their lives. I mean, I guess I see it every evening, or when I go upstairs for lunch or a snack, I'll see it live. So just to twist it around a little bit, like, how do you see marketing to them, or you mentioned personalization, like, is there a next step to marketing to that next layer of consumer who will have purchasing power in the next, either now or next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that, yes, we across multiple different brands, we're trying to even, age down to, not even all the way to there, but even millennial, right? So we're trying to figure out how to continue to do that. I think that you see that in some of our ads that are out there right now, especially if you think of, and if those of you who know the Activia brand, you probably remember Jamie Lee Curtis, if you're, my age plus, which is, I'm old. So if you, and that you can probably, is synonymous with like an older brand. So how do we take that and really kind of make it more modern, make it more enthusiastic, not only in how we're communicating from the creative standpoint, but where we're communicating. We have a similar challenge of what we're trying to do, and even I'd say too, with the products we're creating, right? That's another piece of it. It's how do you go to market with new innovations that are going to hit on those consumer needs, whether it be, gut health and immunity. That's really focused for the Activia brand. Obviously, coffee creamers is another one. International Delight is one of our largest brands, and typically coffee creamer and that type of product is for, I'd say, an old, like, call it like 45, 55-ish, right? Is kind of probably like the sweet spot. And how do we, same type of thing, like create products that are going to appeal to a younger, more health conscious generation, or licensing different products, like, with whether it be with candy bars or Fruity Pebbles or Elf, to kind of bring that more cultural, I'd say, aspect into some of our brands, from a product innovation standpoint, as well as where we're going and how to market and how we're reaching them. So we're trying to do that and understand that that's, a key focal point. And I'd say it's a combination of how, in terms of the messaging and how we're, reaching out to those points, but then also, like you mentioned, in your touch points and where we're reaching them, following the consumer. Like, not everybody's watching, NBC in their living room anymore from, the linear cable TV box. So how do I continue to expand and really kind of have those focused efforts to those audiences, because that's how we're going to continue to grow.
Yeah, my Gen Zers don't even go to the set-top box; they go right to the connected apps completely.
Same.
So
I know, unless there's sports, which we still
yes,
have.
that does happen. Exactly. So I know we're getting close on the time, and I definitely want to touch on a couple other subjects, because another big topic in 2021 is the end of the cookie. Right, everybody's talking about this. It's a huge opportunity. Do you see it as a big opportunity for really for your brands overall to deepen your relationship with your consumers?
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, we've done a lot of work to try and set ourselves up for success. I mean, I think if you think about consumer packaged goods, and especially like, our products, yes, we want to have our brands have a valuable connection with our consumers, but I don't think that, people are like signing up online to like, have to be, yes, maybe from a coupon standpoint, one-to-one communication with our brands from like a CRM standpoint. I don't think that's the, the biggest way in. I think it's more so having brands that resonate and speak to the needs of what, the population wants and needs and stands for. And I think that is more of the, communication and those different channels where we're communicating, how they can identify with what we're offering. I mean, we have amazing brands and amazing products. So I think that is really helps speak for itself to meet consumers' needs. And then giving that, I'd say, more emotional connection with some of the marketing that we're trying to do and create our manifesto brands is really important. And then I think, yes, from a data standpoint, we've tried to set ourselves up with identity links, understanding who our audiences are, creating those that are, utilizing sales data, and other data points that then are ours, that we can then target off on and curate and understand more about them versus relying on the third-party cookies, is definitely what we've tried to do. And we have put that into action this year across many touch points, but in video in particular, we actually looked at something started doing this in Q1, where we're, targeting off of the identity links versus third-party cookies, and you can see much more increased performance for that. So it's, understanding who they are, how many times you're reaching them, and start to curate that, retarget off of it, to really curate that relationship and know who you're reaching is super important. So I think, it's definitely a big opportunity to really understand more of who you're actually reaching versus, when you look up how your third party cookied and how it's so different from who you really are. I think that's super, very, very valuable, and hopefully it'll continue down the path of us seeing more, increase in our results, and actually, providing consumers advertising and products and information that they are desiring.
That's great. And I guess I had one last question. We have time. Going to measurement, because we look at a holistic media campaign, and I said in the very beginning, measurement is very critical, plays a critical role in holistic video investment. Knowing that, like, what would you press measurement companies on to make sure that they're effectively measuring your campaigns overall?
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. I think, I'd say I'd love to have that common denominator, right? Of like all the different metrics. I'd say that is the holy grail, where I'm not, measured TV on 18 plus and women 25-54, and over here for my, dairy avoiders, one of the activation communities we have. I'd say that is the biggest thing. I'd say another is, how do I know who I'm reaching, how many times, like the frequency bit, and how are all of those things really driving, sales and growth for my brands. The holy grail of the closed loop.
Certainly is, and I know there's multiple partners out there that are trying to tackle that. Whether it be Nielsen or ComScore or others in the scope of measurement. So I guess I have one last question I'll throw at you, because the theme of today was succeeding in a multi-screen world. What does it mean to you? And we definitely touched upon it, but just as closing, what does it mean to you on succeeding in a multi-screen world?
Yeah, I mean, for me right now, and the kind of the challenge that we're set out to do is, how do we go to market with that agnostic and holistic video strategy? And how do I know if I'm successful with that, by, measurement and things that I'm putting into the marketplace, and, or, how do I really go to market with, say, one key partner and create that holistic video strategy across linear as well as FEP, programmatic, even, other ways in, potentially beyond the video screen. So, and reaching the most, our consumer in those points where we know they are. So that continued evolution.
Yeah, the evolution is key. Finding the commonality and one point, not one point of contact or one vendor, but a unified approach into the overall marketplace, I think is key, and interoperability is another piece of that too. So
yeah.
Well, thank you guys both so much. That was a great way to close out. I was listening along and Andrew kept being like, one more question, just one more. And I was glad that you did, because we want to get all the insights we can from both of you while you're here. But thank you both so much for closing out our live cast today. It was really such a treat to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
And thank you so much to everyone who tuned in at home for our Future of TV live cast today, and to all of the other speakers we heard from. It was such a great session, and we hope to have you all join us again for our next live cast tomorrow. Starting at noon Eastern time, we'll be having our Brands at Home Summit, joined by marketing leaders from Samsung, Simple Health, Walker & Co., Coca-Cola, Century 21, Microsoft, and many more. So we hope to see you guys then, and thank you so much.